Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is my show. I'm sorry I spilled a huge amount of coffee just before start. I realized I needed some sugar in it before the show started. That is way too much information for any of you to have, but I will give it to you nonetheless. Look, I hope you guys are doing all right. Decent day. I hope you guys have had a decent morning, decent night up to this point. I want to start in a weird place today. Right now, there is a UFO hearing taking place, apparently. I didn't even know this was going on. I've been so involved in what has been taking place in the political space. I took my eye off of this. The reason I'm cringing at that is because this is part of the political space, even though it's not part of the political space we ever really discuss or get to see usually. This is going on right now.
Challenge Mo from him as SecDef.
That Congress member that you just saw before they moved over to this guy, he pointed out during the hearing, he said, I just would like to read some of what Schellenberger submitted to us. And one of the things that Michael Schellenberg submitted, Schellenberg is the one who's heavy on this idea of government censorship and those type of things. And he pointed out, he said, the ship or the military saw a very large triangle hover above them, turned, and took off. And apparently the people who were there watching this, you could imagine they're in somewhat of a bit of awe watching this craft above them, this kind of amazing mechanics, and took off. There was another one where apparently he said there were, 3 sedan-size orbs that they couldn't get a radar lock on, but they were calling in assets to intercept. And his point is kind of like, what are we supposed to do with this, right? Like, this is stuff that elements of the military know or elements of government knows, but one hand doesn't quite know what the other hand is doing, meaning you have an element, let's say, of the government space, and maybe it's even run out of the presidency, we don't necessarily know, but elements of the government space that knows nothing about what is taking place, meaning you have a lot of the stuff that is entirely in the black, which brings up other questions, right? Like, if this stuff is in the black, okay, who knows? Is it you read into it? Is it unacknowledged special access projects where Bob, your employee, may know, but you as Bob's boss may not know because you don't really have a reason to know. And Bob was put into the program for various reasons, in which case Bob can never tell you, despite the fact that you're Bob's boss. It is fascinating. There seems to be an element of a shadow government. And I mean that in the most literal sense of the word, where stuff that under normal circumstances you would think will be negotiated, argued, policy-wise discussed, it's not. Which anybody who used to watch the channel before knows this is one of my heavy topics. When Democrats and Republicans decide, hey, this is an issue we both agree upon. Why do you think they agree upon it? They agree upon it because they realize they're being locked out of it. And so you may have companies that would have access to certain technologies that the government doesn't know. And because they're private companies, well, you can't get a FOIA request into a private company. So if Lockheed Martin has access to some kind of tech from otherworldly tech, well, you can't FOIA Lockheed Martin. It's a private company. And by the way, they do it on purpose for that very specific reason. So you can't get information about it. You have people who are in government, hell, people who are in the military that went looking for various information and they were effectively told, kick rocks. We're not giving you squat. And this has been something that's persistent in our government. It is a very weird thing in a government that is supposed to be ruled by the public for the people who are the public's representatives to be entirely locked out of information. And I mean, locked tight, where they're not even aware of the stuff being there. When you had Christian Gillibrand, Marco Rubio, all of these people who effectively came out saying, we want to get more information on this, we want to pass legislation, we want to pass eminent domain laws. Think of what they were saying. We want to pass laws that would allow us to go into the darkness and pull this out. And not just going to the darkness to pull us out. We want to even make it criminal if you don't bring this to our attention. The only reason you would need to do that is if you are locked out of it. And you can imagine that if you're a member of Congress, it is a bit unsettling for you to realize that there's this shadow government, this program that has radical consequences for what it means to be a person, what it means to be a human being, hell, what it even means in the context of a potential larger reality. And you're completely out of the loop. Oh, that is fascinating. That is super fascinating. And so when they're having this conversation and they're talking to witnesses or they're talking to various people who are like, look, this is what I saw. This is what I know. This is where you can go put your hands on it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The Wall Street Journal came out with an article recently. In the article, if you were part of the UFO community, you would realize how ridiculous the article was. But the article wasn't intended for you. It was intended for others. And the stuff that they were saying was ludicrous. I've had interviews. I've been to committee meetings, not committee meetings, I guess it was committee meetings in DC, where people like Bob Jacobson, Robert Elias, these people who, Elias ran a nuclear missile site. And when he was on staff, he gets a panicked, freaked out phone call from one of his men who are at the front of the base, seeing lights in the sky that were close enough to freak them out. You have this highly sensitive military base dealing with nuclear weapons, and you have something that is flying in the sky that you don't necessarily know what it is. The man was apparently hysterical. And Elias, not necessarily fully grasping what's going on, is telling the guy effectively, explain to me what is happening. Now, it gets to the point where Elias notices that the nuclear weapons start going offline, one after the next, after the next, after the next. Now, this is not supposed to happen because of the way these things are wired. You can imagine that if one goes down and you're in the middle of a nuclear war, you're ass out. It's not supposed to happen that way. It's not supposed to do that at all, let alone all of them, considering that apparently these things are supposed to be on separate circuits. He's blown away by this. It didn't just happen to him, it happened to multiple facilities. Jacobson, another one, he was doing optical engineering, and he was supposed to be taking pictures of a new missile that the US was launching. Oh God, this was the 70s or 80s. The missile goes up, and he is at an angle where he's supposed to be able to record the missile going up and effectively the launch. The missile had a hiccup. The missile goes up into the air, something happens to it, and it either explodes, blows up, something happened to it, but it was a failure. He gets called into a meeting with a bunch of other brass, and they show him what he recorded, and they said, what's that? Now, what they were pointing to was this little device that apparently was at the head of the missile that seemingly was beaming something at the top of the missile, and then flies off. Now, this is happening blisteringly fast. And he's looking at this like, that looks like a UFO. And they told you would never say that word again. Basically, get the F out, talk no one about this, etc. The Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, at no point spoke to Elias, even though they referenced his case. And they tried to argue that the US was using some kind of EMP weapon in order to test EMPs on taking out nuclear weapons. With the problem being, the EMP thing wasn't even invented or even tested for like 10 years later. I mean, it's absurd. My point is, it is very strange. And it's strange in 2 points. One, that this stuff is in a black. Two, that they're bringing it out of the black or trying to. And I was very Pollyannish about this the first time around. When I first got into this, I was more into the space brother camp. I am well out of the space brother camp. It's not that I think we're under threat or in danger. It's more so I don't necessarily trust the people who are holding the information and how that information is let out. Do you really know Lou Elizondo's motives? Who pays Lou Elizondo? The man is a counterintelligence expert. Who pays him, right? What is the motivation? They could just be love and light. It's possible. It's possible. Do I believe that? No, I do not. What of your political space leads you to a point of view that whatever is being released is not being released for reasons and for certain angles. And it's one thing if you don't pay attention to what these people are doing, but do you think Donald Trump is an honest actor? Do you think Joe Biden was an honest actor? Do you think Obama's an honest actor? Do you think Bill Clinton is an honest actor? Do you think, keep going back in time. The reason I'm asking that is, do you think Ted Cruz, Nancy Pelosi, do you think any of these people are honest actors? And in the context of issues of intelligence, when they are leaking information out, do you think they're leaking it out because they just want the American public to be filled in with the truth? Is that what you think? Is Russia the complete aggressor when Ukraine is a model of democracy? Is Israel, the most moral military in the world? Meaning, how far down the list of items do we need to go before you kind of say, okay, you're right, these people are dishonest, inherently dishonest? So they can be inherently dishonest on all of this other stuff, but on this specific issue, they're brimming light of truth. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I've been jaded by my experience doing this channel. I want to bring in my man, though. We're joined, and this is a hard pivot. And no, I had no intention of having that conversation. It's just in watching the hearing, it just comes to mind. Brian Berletic, the man himself. Brian Berletic, he's a Bangkok-based geopolitical researcher, writer, and host, and creator of the New Atlas, a fantastic outlet. Brian, how you doing, man? You doing okay today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me back on. I can talk about UFOs if you want.
Oh, dude, you don't want me to go there. You're here for an hour talking about UFOs. I used to be the correspondent at my network for the UFO thing, and I covered this topic for decades. And like I used to be very Pollyannish about it, like, oh, space brother, and it's love and light. And I don't buy that. I just don't. Especially from the standpoint of the government releasing information, I'm more inclined to believe that that stuff is done in order to push you in a particular direction, not necessarily to give you the truth. I don't know why this issue would be different than any other issue that we cover. But could you take on
a distraction? I agree with that. Whatever the truth is, you'll never find out from these people. And any information that they release is obviously going to be to manipulate people, distract them, divide them. That's all. Anything that they do, that's the purpose behind everything that they do. So if we want answers, we have to go and look for them ourselves. And when we listen to these people who have repeatedly lied to us, whether it's Democrat or Republican, about every conceivable topic, this is not the first topic they're going to actually tell the truth about, which is actually a thing that's making me upset right now, because there were these protests here in Bangkok, and people are just assuming, oh, they see protests, must be a U.S. color revolution, instead of just typing in NED Thailand and figuring out which group is funded by the NED, which group is fighting the NED, and U.S. Instead of just doing that, they just assume that these are, and they're looking at the media, and the media is like, oh, these are anti-government, this, that, and the other thing, and you're like, these are the same Western sources that lied to you about absolutely everything else. What makes you think they're telling the truth about Thailand? This would be the first thing they ever told the truth about. Do you honestly believe this is something they're telling the truth about? The answer is obviously no. So
I will tell you, your prime minister is very attractive. I don't care if she's having a conversation with the Cambodian guy that she called uncle. I don't care. She'd get my vote forever. I'm halfway joking. Is that what the protest was about? Effectively, that she had a conversation and they thought that she was attacking the Thai military, and they didn't necessarily like her calling the guy uncle, which is funny to me. Like, calling him daddy seems like it would have been worse than uncle.
Well, I mean, culturally in this part of the world, that is not actually unheard of. The word is translated loosely into big brother, big sister, uncle, auntie. So don't read too much into that. But the main problem is the current prime minister is in office as a product of political nepotism. Her last name is Chinawat, and her daddy is a billionaire. That's why she's prime minister. Not because she's qualified, not because she worked her way up. It was because Thaksin Shinawatra, the US-backed billionaire who has been in and out of politics. His sister was prime minister. His brother-in-law was prime minister. There's a pattern here developing. Yeah. He puts these people into office to sit in the chair while he is the one actually making the decisions, often as a convicted criminal and fugitive hiding abroad with US backing, with European backing. The groups in the streets that come out for him, which are not the same protests that were out just this week, are funded by the U.S. government. A lot of them are the organizations involved in the media legally. Some of the leadership are drawn from organizations funded by the National Endowment for Democracy, which still exists, even though a lot of Trump supporters think it was defunded and dismantled. Wrong. It's still there. Look it up. Its page is still there. And they still have a page for Thailand. Only now they're not disclosing any of the groups that they're funding. So you have to already know which groups those are. Luckily, I've documented it since 2010. I've documented this meticulously. I used to write anonymously as under a pen name, Tony Cartolucci. So no one knew who I was. And I was literally in their offices for many years, going in and out, sitting in on meetings, meeting them. They knew who my pen name was, and they hated me because I was exposing them. And they were talking to me, had no idea I was that person. There's a lot of very ironic and funny situations like that. But then for my own safety, I had to come out under my real name because the U.S. Embassy knew who I really was. And they were upset with my work. They were upset that I was connecting the anti-military, anti-monarchy protests are backed by the U.S. The pro-military, pro-monarchy protests, that is uniquely Thai. What a lot of people don't know about Thailand, I know this probably wasn't the topic we were going to talk about.
No, go for it. It's interesting.
Yeah, this is what got me into geopolitics in the first place, because I was worried my adopted home would get burned to the ground by U.S. interference. Thailand is the only country in Southeast Asia that was never colonized by a Western power. So all of the nations to the west were colonized by the British, and to the east by the French, and Thailand remained sovereign. This was because the Thai monarchy for 700 years was a unifying force for the Thai people. There was no way for these European powers to get in and divide people against each other. And that still kind of stands to this day. And when you see people attacking the current Thai king, his father, this is a dynasty that's almost as old as the U.S. is a country. Yeah. That's because it is an obstacle to the U.S. politically capturing, dividing, turning Thailand into a battering ram against China. A lot of people, and I was complaining about this on X today, a lot of people are kind of, they're well-meaning, but they're very superficial, left-leaning. They see monarchy, they see military, they automatically associate it with Western institutions and the right wing, when in fact, for example, the king's sister speaks Mandarin. She's a regular guest of the Chinese government. She takes pictures with President Xi Jinping and the foreign minister, and she speaks Mandarin at these events to Chinese audiences. And the monarchy itself has been a very progressive institution, encouraging Thai farmers to actually own their land rather than rent it, engage in agricultural cooperatives. The monarchy advocates infrastructure projects for irrigation, for power generation that benefits all Thai people. They're very active in pharmaceuticals, making Thailand independent in terms of pharmaceuticals. The government pharmaceutical organization, I've actually covered this in the past. They ask Western pharmaceutical corporation, can you sell this to us at a reasonable price? And if the answer is no, we don't care about the patent. We will just make it ourselves. We know how to make it, and we will make it. We have to get this to people that need it. We're not going to dangle it over their head for a price. We need to get it to the people who need it. So that is what the Thai monarchy has done for the Thai people. And Thaksin Shinawatra, he kind of rides this wave of very superficial people power. His protesters wear red shirts to be like Marxist or Maoist or something, but it's all dress up. He is a Wall Street backed, and he himself is a billionaire himself, and he has served U.S. interests since even before he became prime minister in 2001. And this has been a battle between the U.S. getting this billionaire, and then now there's another younger billionaire, Thanathorn Juanggrunggrungke, very, very similar story. U.S. is trying to get these guys to worm their way back into power. and politically capture this country, just like they did to countries like Ukraine or Georgia in 2003. There's protests in Serbia. I haven't really gotten to the bottom of who's behind those, but maybe something sort of like that.
I was going to ask you about whether there was a color revolution. It's a little strange that Azerbaijan, Serbia, all of these countries all of a sudden have issues.
You got to check, because sometimes it's a color revolution sponsored by the U.S. Sometimes it's a counter color revolution. So what the protests in Thailand that we saw over the last week, that is a counter color revolution. They did this once in 2013 to 2014, actually concurrently to the ones in Ukraine. And it was interesting because the Western media was cheering on the Ukrainian mobs, and they were condemning the protests in Thailand, because in Thailand, they were trying to get a U.S. puppet out. In Ukraine, they were trying to get a U.S. puppet in. It's very important to pay attention to the tone of the Western media. If you're not interested in doing all the research and everything, just who's the Western media promoting?
Yeah, just watch their tone. They always know, right? They always know. It's amazing. It's like a cat landing on his feet, or bread always, going butter down.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. I got to be honest. I don't know enough about Thailand politics to talk about it credibly one way or the other. So I'm glad that you can break that down. That's fascinating. Like the only place that where I was aware of them having a king was Nepal. And I didn't know anything about politics at that time. And I was in Nepal, and it just so happened that the king apparently had killed his brother. And after he killed his brother, it's like, well, I'm the king. Anybody have anything to say? And so it was kind of like his brother was supposed to take power. He kills his brother. He takes power. And because he's the king, nobody can say anything about the fact that he's the king. And he had stole apparently a lot of money, whereas Parliament got fed up. Gave him the order to leave or else. And so at the time, nobody knew whether there was going to be military action or not. So there was this kind of, everybody was on pins and needles, not knowing what was going to happen in Nepal. Eventually he just left. He just took the money and left. But that's the probably closest thing to a king that I think I've become, where it was directly involved. Not directly involved, but it was aware of. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. That's awesome. That's fascinating. Because we don't have stuff like that. Like when I used to tell my ex, we don't have anything above our political space. Like there is no unifying thing. Your political space is just your political space. And so if you're not getting along, you're just not getting along. There's nothing to unify a country in the way that a king or some other religious body or whatever would. No, this is not me advocating for those things. I'm just kind of pointing it out. That's fascinating. Let's talk Iran for a bit. And I'm super curious on your take on what happens now. What happens now? Israel and the United States obviously made a play for the king, went for their head. As I often say, racist people don't see the world clearly. They don't see it correctly. And they thought that they could knock over the government within a few days. And that failed miserably. And the U.S. had to get involved to save Israel's ass because it was going bankrupt, and the amount of damage it was taking was well beyond what it thought it would have to take. Foreign Minister of Iran, when asked, came out and said this, talking about the United States strikes. And I want to get your take on this. It's two clips. This is one. I want to get your take on both.
One cannot obliterate.
The head of the UN's nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, has told CBS News that Iran could likely start enriching uranium again within a few months. Is that your assessment as well?
One cannot obliterate the technology and science for enrichment through bombings. If there is this will on our part, and the will exists in order to once again make progress in this industry, we will be able to expeditiously repair the damages and make up for the lost time.
President Trump has made it clear that he will bomb your country's nuclear facilities again if Iran does indeed start enriching uranium again. Are you prepared for that?
Is this a lawful act?
Let me stop there. I want to get your take on that. I got to be honest, that clip bugged the hell out of me. When I heard him say that, I was like, what the F, man? What the F? Give me your take on that before I go to the next clip. Is it a lawful act?
Well, I mean, the U.S. is trying to make a legal case to do something that is just completely illegal, which is launch a war of aggression against a sovereign nation on the other side of the planet that poses no threat whatsoever, immediate or even intermediate, to the U.S. or even to Israel. We have to remember, Iran had this huge ballistic missile arsenal all along. They could have used it at any time of their choosing. And they only ever used it in a very measured way when Israel attacked Iran first. Yes. And then also when the US attacked Iran first, they retaliated with these missiles. And this is what US policymakers in their policy papers across all of these years have been saying about Iran privately. Well, not really privately, because the papers are available public, but they know they know the public will never read them. But they have said, even if they were to get nuclear weapons, they only use it as a deterrent. We have them surrounded, and that is what they are reacting to. And that it's a very rational reaction. When you're surrounded, every nation around you has been invaded, occupied, destroyed, the government's just toppled and replaced. You fear that you're going to be next, and you're going to react in a very predictable and rational way, which is to create a deterrent. You're not going to attack Israel or attack the US for no reason. You're going to get one bomb, and use it against countries that have hundreds of nuclear weapons. Doesn't make any sense, and they admit that in their papers. So what the US is doing is trying to, once again, just like in 2003, they're lying. They're trying to fabricate, I would say, a pretext to wage war with Iran. They already have now waged war with Iran. I would disagree. I would say the plan always was for Israel to provoke the war and for the US to wade in. That's exactly what it said in their policy papers. I was warning for months and months that all of this talk about negotiations with Iran were cover for plans for the US to ultimately go to war with Iran. They would have Israel attack during the negotiations. I said that, and that is exactly what happened. And then people, again, the same people could not see this coming, had no idea, who even went out of their way to say this was not going to happen. Now they're saying, well, President Trump was dragged in unwillingly into this. No, it's not true. This was always the plan. It's on a piece of paper 16 years ago. In excruciating detail, they laid all of this out, has happened to the letter, line by line. This is what they planned out, and as what has happened. So you ask, are they going to enrich uranium? If they were smart, they would go down the North Korea path. But the North Korea path is not just nuclear deterrent. It's also a significant conventional deterrent. North Korea was able to keep this from happening to them because they had a huge conventional military deterrent. They had unbelievable amounts of artillery pointed at South Korea. They could send hundreds of thousands of rounds constantly over the demilitarized zone for days and days, weeks and weeks. The U.S. had, as we can see in Ukraine, the U.S. had no ability to keep up with this. And they also had huge amounts of conventional rockets and missiles, kind of like what Iran has. And so that is what kept the U.S. at bay until they were able to develop nuclear weapons. Now they have the ultimate form of deterrent. People ask, why are they launching missiles? Is it because they're crazy? No, they need to demonstrate this capability to the United States. So the U.S. understands that. If you try to do to North Korea what you did to Iran, we can and we will nuke you. We have the ability to do it. So leave us alone. We're not bothering anybody. We have never provoked a war with anyone this entire 21st century. So just leave us alone and we will leave you alone. This is what Iran needs to do, because the alternative is, and even the US calls it this, the Libya model, where you just roll over, surrender everything, and allow them to, as you said in a previous show, just keep pecking away at Iran like they did to Syria until the government topples, and then it's a failed state, and then the U.S. has complete control over the whole region, and then they have further isolated, encircled, and contained Russia and China, which is where all of this is headed.
Yeah, agreed. It's funny the number of people who are analysts who didn't think this was going to happen, and I didn't quite understand why they didn't think it was going to happen. Like you would have like hardcore military people who would be like, "Yeah, I don't think it's rational." It's like, dude, what if it's like there's context? It's like, I don't know, it was just strange to me that it's not like Israel was quiet about it. We've taken down Syria, we need to go after Iran. They were very clear. And, we have knocked over every government in the Middle East. What makes Iran special in this case? Like, I didn't understand why they thought this was so off the table. These guys were neocons. I guess I don't like his answer because I don't like that question, that ending thing of, is that legal? Dude, we are well beyond legalities, right? There is no Leviathan. There is no international law. It's a law of the jungle. You either can defend yourself or you can't. It boils down to that.
Exactly. Unfortunately.
And it is unfortunate. I want to play this secondary clip for Agachi, I believe the way it's pronounced. Negotiations. And I want to get your take on that too. Should Iran go back into negotiations? Now, this is what he had to say when asked about negotiations. Again, this is another answer I don't like all that much, but here we are. Here he goes with it. Here we are.
The doors of diplomacy will never slam.
President Trump has said that talks with your government could restart as early as this week. Will that happen?
I don't think negotiations will restart as quickly as that. In order for us to decide to re-engage, we will have to first ensure that America will not revert back to targeting us in a military attack during the negotiations. And I think with all these considerations, we still need more time.
Still, the door is not entirely closed to direct talks with the U.S.
The doors of diplomacy will never slam shut.
Dude, like, to me, like, even if that's give me a take on it. I'm not even going to say anything. Give me your take.
Well, again, people have to remember, Iran was negotiating with the U.S., Russia was negotiating with the U.S. Neither nation made any concessions whatsoever in any shape, form, or way. They made no concessions at all, and they are doing this simply as their part of trying to manage public perception, which is what the U.S. is doing. The U.S. is trying to use the negotiations to tell the world, hey, we tried. And if Iran says no, if Russia says no, if China says we're not going to talk to you, then the U.S. is already a downhill battle. We know this. It's a downhill battle. Many people across the West are extremely racist, very low attention span, and they already believe all of these people are their enemies. And if they hear something from the foreign minister of Iran saying we're not going to negotiate, all that's going to do is reinforce all of these lies that have been told to them. If they constantly keep coming back to the negotiation table, people are going to be like, why? If they're so evil, why are they still talking to us? And it kind of, there's a lot of people who are kind of waking up. Even diehard Trump supporters are like, why are we doing this? We voted Trump into office to stop these wars. They were negotiating, and then you're dropping bombs on their head. Why are we doing this? So some people are waking up, but many other people aren't. And again, in the policy papers, the negotiations are a trap. There is no genuine interest by Trump or Biden or any of these people, Obama, to negotiate with any of these countries. It's always a trap that they lay out, and they're trying to use it to frame these targeted nations, portray them as not wanting diplomacy. So if you double down in that role, all you're doing is helping them sell this war to their own public. Unfortunately, I think for Iran, I mean, this doesn't really matter what they do. There's still going to be a large percentage of the Western population that's always going to be eager for war. I saw people cheering this on, and Americans don't have anything to be proud of. They're not building anything. They're not going anywhere as a nation. The only thing they have to look forward to is the next nation the U.S. takes something away from, the next country they bomb, overthrow the government of. This is what they have to feel proud about, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so it's sad. It's very sad.
Yeah. I guess my thing is, look, I understand where you're coming from with this, and I do get the logic of being amicable, of being open to talks. But it's kind of like, somebody saying, hey, I would like to sleep with your wife. Can we negotiate it? It's bizarre, right? I mean, it's like you're asking them to negotiate something. A sovereign nation, that rational human being will say it's none of your business. And that's what this negotiation is. It's like, hey, we don't want you to do enrichment. Okay, even under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, they have a right to do enrichment. They have a right to build nuclear power facilities. This is well within their right to do, even under the treaty obligations that they've agreed with. And so the U.S. coming in for something that is none of the U.S. business, purely, let's be honest, for regime change, quote unquote.
Yes.
Using this as a stalking horse to do so. I mean, but even the stalking horse is strange. So I do get where you're coming from. From my point of view, I am well beyond this idea that Iran, Russia, any of these countries would get a good headline in the U.S. Iran could have bent over backwards, and Jesus could have came to Iran and offered him bread and they still would have wrote a horrible headline about Jesus coming to Iran. Like, there's nothing that they can do that would ever get a good headline out of the West. And so I'm well beyond this case of caring about what headline they write in the West, at least from my point of view as Iran. But I get your point. They are trying to manage image, not just to the US and to the West, but also the global South. Fair enough. I hate that they do that. That's all. I've gotten to the point where I even hate that Russia is like, yeah, the door is open. But it's different in Russia's case. In Iran's case, we're being bullies, and we're explicitly trying to steal something that we have no right to take. So,
well, I do agree with that point that you made, because the U.S. has no business talking with Iran in the first place, and Iran should make that very clear to the world. Say, we want to negotiate, but why are we negotiating with the U.S.? Did the UN nominate you to arbitrate this? No. The answer is no. So we want to negotiate, but not with the United States, because it's none of your business. You're under international law. You have no right to interfere in this. This is not your business. If you think that we're violating the non-proliferation treaty, you don't come here and talk to us. You go to the UN and you talk to them and you set something up over there. And so that, I think that was a mistake on Iran's part. But again, we can talk a lot about many mistakes that Iran, Russia, China are making. I would say the biggest mistakes they're making are not necessarily negotiating with the U.S. because let's just imagine they just said, no, we're not negotiating, or but if they said that, go through the UN and we will do it. What would their answer be? So I think they should have done that. I think that is a mistake, and I think they need to force the U.S. to go through the UN. If you're trying to buy time, which is what I think Iran and Russia and China are all trying to do,
yes,
if you go through the UN, we'll eat up even more time than negotiating with them directly. With the U.S. has no. When you do that, you are granting them some sort of authority that they don't have in any shape, form, or way. So I agree with you. I do think that is a mistake.
And bring up Israel's nukes. Israel's nukes. And bring like, hey, if you want us to get rid of our program, fine. Israel needs to get rid of the nukes. That way we'll be safe.
Like, inspect it and dispose of it. Yes,
the Libyan model for Israel's nukes. I mean, man, like it is mind blowing to be in the U.S. and hear these constant arguments about, oh my God, Iran and nukes, and it's like, dude, Israel's nukes. They're a lunatic country with nukes. Like, it's just mind blowing. I want to get your take on something else. Trump. I think I might slightly disagree with you on some of this. I don't get the sense. For one, Donald Trump doesn't read policy papers. People around him do. And so while I don't doubt that the people around him knew exactly what they were doing, like the direction they wanted to go, I don't get the sense that Trump entirely knew. It seemed like Trump was told something like, hey, Israel can do it. And Trump says, okay, it's a win. And then when he couldn't do it, the U.S. had to now put his fingerprints on it and get directly involved. Something that I am not certain that Trump wanted. I mean, because he was mystifying me for a while. I was like, what is going on with him? Is he senile? Does he have dementia? Like, why is he acting this way? Like, for example, he would come on and says, it's obliterated. Okay, well, everybody knows that's a lie. So why are you saying that? Because if your framing of argument is, well, they have nukes, that's a stalking horse, so we need to do something about the nukes. Okay, that's a little bit weird for you to say, well, it's all gone, war's over, everything's over with, everything's finished, night, good night. And Israel is still saying, we're going to attack. Like, they're saying two completely different things, right? And so I get the sense that the people around Trump might have been aware of what's going on. I think he's out to lunch. Give me your take on that. Or do you think, no, Trump was in on it from the entire time? I'm mystified by him if he was.
President Trump has no clue what's going on around him. He knows nothing about anything. I think people can even look at the way he has run his own business and raise some questions about his capabilities, just managing his own business, let alone all of America's business. We know American presidents aren't in charge of anything. We know Congress is in charge of nothing. They are signing off on what is put in front of them, and they are also selling it to the American people. That is his job, and that is something that he's actually good at. That's what he is good at. But he's not making any decisions. So whatever he's saying they're going to do, What you can clearly see is he's saying, "Oh, it's done. It's a done deal," and you could even see how in his own support base and analysts out there who are like, "See, it was all a complex 5D chess move to go to war, to not go to war, to bomb our way to peace in unprecedented acts of military aggression in the one country that we haven't bombed yet. Now we have bombed it." So it was a brilliant masterstroke of pursuing world peace, when in reality, he's saying that, Israel's saying it's not done. And so you see, they just set up the exact same dynamics in the policy paper from 2009 all over again. So now here's the US saying it's settled and we're at peace with Iran. We want peace with Iran. We're going to negotiate. And here you have Israel, the trigger, again, set up as the trigger, and they're going to start the next round of hostilities. The U.S. can pretend, oops, we were doing negotiations again, and Israel attacked again with the bombs that we gave them and the planes that we gave them, and we were refueling them, and we were picking out the targets with our satellites that Israel does not have access to on their own unless we give them access to it. And so they're setting up the exact same dynamics for another round of hostilities. They just need to reload. That's what they're doing right now.
And that's what they're doing right now. The United States apparently is hand over fist reloading Israel, sending thousands of JDAMs, aerial, what are those things? The various different missile types, hundreds of millions of dollars worth.
Yes.
Oh, here it is. So 3,845 JDAM kits for 2,000 pounds. I guess these are bunker busters. 3,280 JDAM kits for 500 pound general purpose bombs. Ain't that nice? General purpose bombs. What happens here? I mean, obviously, Israel was surprised. The U.S. was surprised. The U.S., I don't think, wanted to get his hands dirty. At the very least, Trump didn't seem to. I get the sense that he was told that they could handle it. This will be over within a few days. And they were shocked when it wasn't. Obviously, Israel is aware of Iran's military capability now in a way that they probably weren't necessarily aware of their resilience before. The attempted overthrow didn't work. Now what? What's the new plan? I mean, is it pecking away? I mean, my thought is peck away, to pretend like you're in negotiations with Israel doing strikes and you get, because the thing is, what was demonstrated was that the moment that the U.S. gets involved, Iran backed down, because you have two nuclear powers that are effectively attacking them. And I don't think Iran wants to get into a large protracted war with the U.S. any more than I think the U.S. wants to have 20, 30,000 service members coming back in body bags. And so it seemed that overthrowing the government is easier than going into direct conflict. Give me your take on this, though. How do you think they go after Iran now? And what does Iran have to do going forward? And like you said, the North Korean model, yes. But what is the U.S. strategy and the Israeli strategy at this point?
Oh, I've been warning people about this for a long time. The U.S. has two concepts that they're building all of their foreign policy around right now: a division of labor, region by region. So in Europe, the division of labor is between the U.S. and Europe. Europe is taking over America's proxy war against Russia and Ukraine. They're going to divert more public money away from actually taking care of their people's best interests and funnel it into America's proxy war in Ukraine. And we can see them doing that, and we can see Trump pretending to have a row with them and then being on the same page now. They're doing it in the Middle East. So not just Israel, but the Persian Gulf states that have been allied with the U.S., that are
Abraham
beholden
Shield.
to the U.S.
Right.
Yeah, yes. Something like that. So there's the division of labor there. And then, of course, here in the Asia-Pacific region, the Philippines, Japan, South Korea, the island province of Taiwan, which is actually part of China, and the U.S. has troops there. So you could see, the problem that presents. And then there's the concept, so that's division of labor, and then there's the concept of strategic sequencing. The U.S. cannot fight Russia, Iran, and China at the same time. They need to do it in an order. So they were working on Russia first. They have Russia entangled in Ukraine. They took out Syria because Russia was overextended, wasn't able to commit resources there. And so they were successful in Syria. And I warned people that Iran not being able to help defend Syria was a sign of weakness. And I think we saw some of that weakness in this most recent exchange. It wasn't helplessness, but it wasn't the strength that I think a lot of people imagined Iran would respond with. And again, it's because they're not all powerful. All of these nations have been targeted by the U.S. for decades and decades and decades. So it's amazing that they still survive as they do. And then, of course, so you're talking about, the U.S. does not want to get involved in a protracted conflict in the Middle East. They want this to be quick, and if not quick, at least efficient. So if we're going to drag this out, drag it out efficiently. And that's why they want to do these start and stop, use the negotiations, try to rearm, rebuild, reposition, start reworking the regime change operations that they've constantly been working on for decades, and see if they can't start it again and get something going where they can topple the government on the cheap. They don't need a protracted war, because if they get tangled up in a conflict with Iran or Yemen, even for that matter, or in Ukraine, and they expend huge amounts of resources, they do not have these resources for the ultimate conflict that they're preparing for, which is China in the Asia Pacific region.
Right.
And they're already panicking that they're not going to be able to do it. China's making like 200 times more ships than the US every single year. How do you compete with that? In their mind, they still think that they can. And so this is the clock that they're racing against. And this is what presents the limits to the scope of operations in each one of these regions: Europe, the Middle East, and the Asia Pacific region.
I get the sense that Iran just didn't want to fight, like the frog boiling thing. Like, not that they didn't have the capability, they just didn't want to use it. And so as Syria fell, they stood by. As Hezbollah gets a haircut, they stand by. Like, meaning, one of the Israeli commanders was pointing out that Iran made a mistake by not acting immediately after October 7th, that all forces should have been exerted almost immediately with the idea of trying to overthrow and get rid of Israel. Now, again, what the guy misses is that this wasn't planned. Like, he's talking from the point of view as if Iran was talking to Hezbollah and it was like, hey, yeah, let's just do October 7th and let's kick it off. That wasn't the plan. These groups were acting independently of each other on some level, in which case you can isolate and take down. I do think it's a mistake for Iran to stand by while Syria fell. Oh, that is very true. I agree with you on that, because I gave them basically a gateway. But give me a take on that. I mean, is this an issue of weakness or an issue of just not wanting to throw a punch? There's a difference.
No, it's weakness. People have to understand the realities of modern warfare and the limits to what nations like Iran, Russia, and China, what the limits are to their military power. People see the United States projecting military power around the globe, and they just think, well, look at China. It's catching up. It has a huge economy, a bigger population. They have this huge military. But people don't understand. You have to deliberately design your military in a certain way to project military power around the world the way the U.S. does. And you cannot have the largest high-speed rail network on planet Earth in human history and also project military power around the globe like the U.S. China made a specific decision to invest in its own people, like a normal, rational, healthy government should. The U.S. has not done that, and you can see it reflected on the streets and across rural communities in the United States. You can see what impact it has had. But they do have this ability to project military power. They have politically captured all of these nations they use as proxies in Europe, Israel, the Persian Gulf states. And this is what makes them so menacing. And so Iran is fighting against all of this. They have decades of sanctions. Yes, they're persevering, but it's not effortless. It takes a lot of effort, and there are a lot of trade-offs and sacrifices they have to make. People were talking about their Air Force. They were operating F-14 Tomcats. It's like from the Vietnam War, and F-4 Phantoms from the Vietnam War. These are American planes left over from the U.S.-backed regime that had been thrown out of Iran. So these are ancient warplanes that are practically useless, and on paper, it's an Air Force. In reality, in practice, it is useless. It was not usable. And so this is the problem that they had. This is why they invested in Hezbollah, Ansar Allah, ballistic missiles, and air defenses. And to their credit, this has worked to a certain degree. It has preserved their nation state up until now. But again, there's limits to it. And so they were involved in Syria, and they fought hard. The Russians fought hard. Contrary to popular belief, the Syrian military fought hard. They were ground down. Russia and Iran were overextended by these regional conflicts that are taking place. and it just simply wasn't enough, and they were overwhelmed. And people say these things, oh, the Syrians just gave up, the Russians could have, but they didn't want to, whatever. This is cope. Both sides are prone to coping when things don't go their way. It is weakness. It's not a matter of will. If they had the ability, they would have preserved the Syrian government. It just wasn't possible. They fought very hard in the opening phases of that last battle, but they were overwhelmed because the U.S. just constantly, like you say, they pecked away until there was nothing left. And they overextended and locked Iran and Russia in so that they weren't able to respond with the full force of available resources.
I think I agree with that. I mean, all things being equal, if Russia could have saved Syria, they would have. I don't think they would have wanted the Syrian government to collapse. Yeah, I don't buy the premise, right? The Syrian thing is more interesting because, from my understanding, certain people were bought off. There was internal divisions, or let's say dirty tricks, let's say it that way, quote unquote, in regards to information. Like, meaning apparently there was a lot of stuff that went on in regards to Syria, where you get the Russians that were pissed off, swearing. The Turks apparently pulled a fast one. The conversation with Lavrov came out, obviously, and clearly pissed off talking to the Turks. I don't know. I agree with you, though, that it wasn't a situation that if they could have saved them, they wouldn't have. They just couldn't in that case. I am curious on something else. This seems desperate to me, though. Like, if you look at what is taking place in Ukraine right now, okay, they tried, they weren't able to work. Now they're going to give it to the Europeans, who are in no shape or capacity to do what the United States wants them to do in regards to giving over that responsibility. The US, KJ No often points to this notion of people being able to believe they can fight a bear. It's like 8% of the American public think they can fist fight a bear and win.
Probably.
Yeah, that's what it feels like to me.
Higher than that. Probably higher than that, I would think.
But I guess that's my feeling towards China. Because, as you point out, these are militaries that are designed for the protection of their homeland, not to project power across the globe. And I don't get the sense that the U.S., who's been trying to pivot to Asia for the last, 20-something years, is going to still be able to get over to Asia. They're still bogged down in this issue with the Middle East. Israel is not letting them pull out of the Middle East. I don't get the sense that Ukraine or Europe is going to let daddy leave them in Asia, in Europe. Meaning, this doesn't seem like it's going to plan. At the very least, the plan doesn't seem to be working all that well. But maybe you see it differently. How do you view it?
Well, the U.S. doesn't want to. Has no intention at all whatsoever of abandoning the proxy war against Russia and Ukraine. Has no intention of abandoning its proxy war against its now open war with Iran.
Right.
It wants to wrap all of these up, or at least keep these nations bogged down while it pivots to China and then repeats the whole same process here. There are already proxy wars here in the region being fought by US-backed militants and terrorists against central governments in the region. Myanmar is one that's been ongoing for years and years. I've covered it. I've shown the documented evidence of U.S. involvement in this war against the central government. That is a country that is right on China's border. It is a key Belt and Road Initiative partner. I've talked about how the U.S. backs terrorists in southwest Pakistan. In Baluchistan, they attacked the Chinese engineers. They killed Pakistani security. They even tried to kill the Chinese ambassador to Pakistan at one point. And so this is what they are doing all around the entire globe. It is a global project, and they have huge amounts of resources sunk into this, and they're not interested in disengaging anywhere. The only reason they say these things is to manipulate public perception, and like we are talking about with Europe, they're handing it off to Europe. Europe is not going to be able to invest in Ukraine and beat Russia. But what they need Europe to do is just keep Russia tied, keep it going for as long as humanly possible. That's what they're going for. I'm pretty sure they know they're not going to win that in the long run. There's policy papers that said if we provoke a war with Russia in Ukraine, Ukraine's going to be destroyed in the process. That will be a byproduct of this policy. That was the 2019 Rand Corporation paper extending Russia. So they are pivoting here to Asia Pacific. Like I cover and I tell people and I warn people that they have huge amounts of political influence in all of these countries in the region. They're trying to create a region-wide united front against China They have the Philippines right now politically captured. They're
Yes.
transforming it into a battering ram. They're beefing up the military presence on the island province of Taiwan, which is literally inside China's borders. And they're building up their capabilities in Japan and South Korea. The U.S. is, and they have rearranged the entire military to fight this war with China. And this was ongoing all throughout the Biden administration. And now these pieces are falling into place just as President Trump is announcing. His Secretary Hegseth is announcing that now we're invested in Asia. Now it's time to confront China. That's continuity of agenda, and so we have to keep that in mind. This is a global project. They're not bored here and going here. It's a front that goes from Europe all the way through the Middle East, Central Asia, Asia Pacific. It's like a huge crescent, and they're trying to encircle all of Eurasia and control all of Eurasia.
Now, certainly China, Russia, and Iran knows this. At least at the very least, I hope they do.
Yes, sure.
Iran gives me concerns, I got to be honest with you, but whatever. They know this, and they know that any notion of multipolarity, they are the fulcrums of the multipolarity. It's like, yeah, these other countries are important, but ultimately Russia, China, and Iran is the meat of it that needs to be solidified. And one or all of those needs to be undermined for there to be this kind of, let's say, this grand chessboard win. Where you can, start pecking away at the other countries. What do they need to do in this? They need to work closer in coordination. They need to work closer in strategic military cooperation. I remember I was having a conversation with a gentleman where we were pointing out that BRICS, it's nice to have an economic idea of the world, but if you can't defend yourself, the economic idea doesn't really matter. Like, I may be the brightest person on the planet. If you can take my lunch money, you can take my lunch money. It's kind of that. Is it they need to create more military cooperation? Is that what needs to take place? Because as you point out, they are perfectly aware of what the United States is trying to do. For God's sake, they write it down in policy papers. Donald Trump may only watch porn and not read, he only look at the pictures. I guarantee you that Russia and China are paying attention to what is being written down in those papers. Give me your thoughts on this.
Well, they are working pretty close together. And then, as we've mentioned in the past, there were instances of cooperation that we weren't even aware of, where they were cooperating much closer together than we even realized. And so there's a lot of room for that possibility. One thing that I will say that I'm dismayed over, and that I've raised over many years now, is the concept of information space as a national security domain. I've urged people to take this seriously in countries individually and across entire regions, like, say, BRICS here in Southeast Asia. They need to protect their information space. It is completely controlled by the United States. It is just, and if you cannot control your own information space, you cannot control what information people are getting and or disinformation they're getting, and you have no ability to shape their minds, to get them together on the same page toward national or regional goals. And what you have instead is a foreign interests coming in and shaping them instead and turning them against you. So you could have the most powerful military in the world, a military capable of taking on the United States. But if you cannot convince people to man that military and point the guns in the right direction, then it's all for absolutely nothing. And so this is a huge problem. I don't know whether it's because a lot of just old people are up in this most senior positions, and they still think the internet is like a novelty or something. They don't understand that it's a national security domain, that information space is in the 21st century the same as a land border, your airspace or your shores, and you need to protect it with the same degree of seriousness and in a complete way that you do all of your physical domains. I don't know what's so complicated about that. The US does, China does, Russia does, and I don't know why this is not being impressed upon other nations as part of BRICS, as part of ASEAN. ASEAN is what I meant to say, Southeast Asia. That is a block here in Southeast Asia.
See, I was about to say it's complicated. I was about to say it's complicated when you say it's not complicated. If Russia started doing it as a result of the US doing it, like meaning the moment that the US came and said, okay, well, we're going to get rid of RT and Sputnik, or we are going to use FARA to be more aggressive in going after certain groups. I mean, then Russia started getting, say, okay, if you're going to do that, then we'll do that. Meaning they were doing it in response. Now, I agree with you. That's complicated. Like, it's so easy for a government to say, for example, I'll give you an example, FARA, Georgia. Georgia comes out and says, we don't want companies or let's say corporations coming into our country because certain corporations, certain countries, I'm saying this very poorly, they wanted more control over their information space. And of course, Europe freaks out. And as they point out, they say, well, look, you guys have a FARA law. How are you complaining about the FARA law? The idea of money coming into our country, we want to know where that money is going and if that money is being put into political activities, such as like the NED or the other one, the National Endowment for Democracy. Yes, thank you, USA.
NED.
Basically, we want to know that stuff, right? Because you're a foreign government putting in data and information into our country that may have a vested interest in going against governmental activities, especially if the government is taking a certain policy position that a foreign government doesn't necessarily like. Europe freaks out. The US freaks out. They want to pass sanctions on Georgia. Georgia's pointing out, look, you guys have the exact same policy. How are you bitching at us about something that you have the same policy over? That's Georgia trying to control the information space. So it's not that I disagree with you. I think my issue is, speaking to a Georgian, he said the first thing they're going to do is to go after stuff they don't like. Just like the US, first thing they did. It's not that you guys are saying something that's false. We just don't like the fact that you're saying it. And that's what governments have a vested interest in doing. Like that's what I mean when I say it's complicated. You have to trust that the government is not necessarily going to start using stuff like censorship. And maybe this is because I live in the US that I'm overly concerned about it. But using censorship under this idea that that's misinformation, that's malinformation. That's what our government was effectively doing. Give me your take on that. That's why I say it's complicated. It's not as straightforward. I mean, unless the government is okay with just lying to the public, but I would.
Well, I mean, every country is regulating information already. So what I'm suggesting is that they get control over, like you say, the money coming in. You don't even need to. And here there's things that you could do where you don't even have to do that much. I mean, if you're worried about the US reacting, if you pull the plug on NED funding, but what you need to do is you got to look at your political space, your information space, like a Go board. So this is another board game. Instead of taking pieces off of it, you're trying to put as many pieces on it. Right now, if you look at the Go board of, say, Thailand, almost all of the pieces were put there by the US. So if you're not going to make laws and restrict it, at least start putting more of your own pieces on the board. Now, the problem is, say the Thai government makes a national news agency like Thai PBS, for example, and they have this huge campus, but all of the journalists were trained in the West.
Yes.
And then they come and they go work for this Thai news agency, and all they're doing is regurgitating Western propaganda because their whole personal and professional network for they themselves is locked into a Western professional and personal network. All the people that they met and are still in contact with. And so all you end up with is a Thai-funded version of the BBC or CNN or Voice of America, and it completely defeats the purpose. So what you need is, in your universities, you need programs, a pipeline where you're taking people who are interested in international relations, foreign affairs, journalism. You have a pipeline to teach them step by step and get them into a position where they are working for the interests of this country, Thailand, and not for the interests of Wall Street and Washington, literally on the other side of the planet. And now Russia and China have those pipelines in place, and they create huge numbers of people who are working in their own national interests. In countries like here in Thailand, even the universities have been heavily infiltrated by NED-funded programs. I spent years exposing them, where they got a U.S. embassy corner in the university library. Like, why is that there? Is there a Chinese embassy corner in like Harvard library? I don't think so. But there are ones here in the universities in Thailand. And so why is that being allowed? And if you're allowing it because you're worried about the repercussions, at least there's 4 corners in the library. So you do something with the other 3 corners where you're balancing out or balancing it in your favor. This is what I'm trying to say. And the same thing with Meta and YouTube and X dominates the social media landscape here in Thailand. Create an indigenous, you don't have to ban them. Just create your own, so that when these, because a big thing that they like to do is they like to say, we're not following local Thai laws. We're applying US laws to these networks, even though they're in your country. And what are you going to do about it? You have no alternatives. So you create your own alternatives. And then you ask them, please comply to our laws, or we will kick you out. And yes, now we have an alternative. So you're creating leverage for yourself. Leverage you might not even need to use, but you need to start taking it seriously. You cannot just keep ignoring it, because it's like a terminal illness. You could ignore it and pretend it's not there, but every day it's killing you. If you don't do something about it, eventually you will just drop over dead one day. And that's what happens with US regime change. They infect these countries every year. It spreads deeper and wider and deeper and wider until one day these leaders wake up and they're not in control of their country anymore. This is what happened to Bangladesh. And this lady who's I can't remember her name, it was a while ago. She just woke up one day and she's on a helicopter going to India. She knew the NED was involved, but she wouldn't do anything about it at all. Sometimes she would kind of go along with it, because she thought, maybe if I go along with it, they'll give me a seat at the table. There's no seat at the table for you. If you're not a rich white guy, there's no place at the table for you. Sorry, there isn't.
She just woke up on a helicopter going to Bangladesh.
pretty
Going
much.
Going to India. Going to India. Oh, that is not what, that's not what you want to happen. You just wake up one morning on your way to India. I guess, let me end where I began. Do you foresee Israel immediately going back into this attack after they reload? I mean, obviously they did take a hit, and obviously they took a financial hit on top of it. I think they spent like $12 billion a day, some insane amount. Not to mention them running out of shells. The U.S. Had given Ukraine shells for 3 years, and now having to try to do both was not able to do so. So they had to pull from one theater to give to the other theater, and even then they were somewhat at a shortage. Are they even capable of resuming this conflict immediately, or do they fall back on the Abraham Accords as a way of trying to marginalize Iran going forward?
I think it will be a combination of things. They're gonna try to continue to isolate and undermine Iran through many means, not just military attack. But yes, once they're reloaded, if they think they can carry an attack out and diminish Iranian power even further, then they most certainly will, and the U.S. will too. And I've warned people that everyone's saying that this was some 5D chess move toward world peace. This was the U.S. breaking a political limit that was there against striking Iran. Now that the U.S. has struck Iran, they're going to keep striking Iran. Israel will continue to strike Iran. They have been since when they first struck that Iranian consulate in Syria. I mean, that's what they do. They do the salami slicing until it's all out, and people take for granted when they finally arrive there. They take it for granted because it was done so gradually. So that's what they're doing. I just think there is a limit to how much they can do at any one time, because ultimately it's not Iran that's the final objective here. It is Russia and China. So they have to conserve their energy. They have to look at the big picture, and Russia, Iran, and China also have to look at the big picture. As far as people talking about how much this cost Israel, this is ridiculous. America's just printing out money, and they have paid for everything up until now, and they will pay to fix everything that was damaged to Israel. They will pay for all of the air defense and missile defense systems Israel is using, all paid for by U.S. taxpayers. So as far as Israel's concerned, they don't care. That the client regime in power there doesn't care about costs, because they're not the ones paying for it. The American public is paying for it. So that's very important to keep in mind.
I agree with you and I disagree with you. I mean, you still have an economy that needs to function. That economy effectively was flatlined for the entirety of the war. The ports shut down, the airport shut down, none of that stuff, meaning the entirety of the country effectively went into a seizure. The people couldn't even leave. They had to go to like Cyprus and start invading Cyprus, buying up Cyprus property. And one last point, Israel is supposed to be the safe haven. Okay, what happens when it's no longer a safe haven? Effectively dies.
This is all propaganda. All Israel is the Middle Eastern version of Ukraine. And so
I agree with you.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm
Well,
just going to say, I agree with you on that. But the people who are there believe that propaganda. Like, meaning
but
they inhale that propaganda as this is our safe place, this is our country, etc. Okay, if those people leave, then it is just kind of what it was meant to be, this platform in the Middle East to go after Middle Eastern governments.
yes, exactly. That's what, and there's going to be a lot of disappointed people. And the economy. I agree with you. The economy, is always Israel as a nation state. It struggles to be a legitimate nation state because really all it is a forward operating base masquerading as a country. And there is a possibility for it to one day be a sustainable nation state, but not in the configuration it's in right now. The economy collapsing. Again, the U.S. doesn't care. The Ukrainian government, how long ago has that collapsed? That's not a viable economy, and they just keep it propped up artificially, and they will do the same to Israel for as long as it's possible and profitable. And then when it isn't, they'll pull the plug on it, just like all their other proxies around the globe. And people find that hard to believe, but just wait and watch. I think them catching ballistic missiles morning, noon, and night for 2 weeks should be a wake-up call. All these people who thought Israel's like the master of puppets and the U.S. is their proxy. Why wasn't it the U.S. catching those ballistic missiles? Why was it Israel catching them and the U.S. benefiting from all of this and paying no cost for any of it? It's a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call.
Brian, always appreciate you, man. Always, which is like catching missiles for 2 weeks. Yes, they were. Catching missiles for 2 weeks. Brian Berletic, he is a Bangkok-based geopolitical researcher, writer, and host of The New Atlas, a fantastic show. And I know I always say this, but it's true. Before I even knew who you were, I had videos saved of you giving breakdowns of stuff where I literally sat there and watched it. I was like, wow, that guy's right. I don't even remember what it was. I just have it in my save folder for something that you were giving a breakdown on. It says, this is one of the clearest explanations of whatever the hell you were talking about that day that I've come across. So keep up the good work, man. You're fantastic. Be safe, man.
Thank you.
You have a good one. All right, Brian Berletic. And I mean that, by the way. I told you guys before, I would not give a compliment if I don't mean it. At the very least, not a real compliment. And I know that sounds weird, but there's a difference sometimes. Brian's work has been exemplary. And, while there may be a difference between what someone writes versus how it's espoused in reality, from a standpoint of a direction, I do agree with a direction that I think this government is going. As I said, there's been a continuity of what has been taking place in the Middle East. And that continuity has led right to the doorstep of Iran, where there's a monster, blood on his knuckles, knocking at the door. And Brian was one of those first people who were saying it earlier. He was like, I don't care what they say. I don't care who the administration is. This is what these people are doing. For me, I need to see what the administration is. I want to give the benefit of the doubt. But again, at a certain point, it becomes clear, okay, Trump is lying. Why is Trump doing this? Why is Trump expanding the horizons if indeed he's not necessarily trying to have some kind of strike on Iran? Obviously, Donald Trump wants to overthrow the government of Iran, and he wants to use Israel to do it. Meaning at a certain point, even in reality, it's just clear. And I get a lot of people look at it and think to themselves, he's not going to do it. It's not rational for him to do it. There's no way he's going to do it. And what would I tell each and every one of those people who came on the show? I was like, rationality is not always rational. And you have a bunch of neocons that believe this is their opportunity. And I would also point out that people who are hateful and racist don't see the world clearly. They see it through a certain lens. They often overestimate their own capability and underestimate their opponent's capabilities. And if that is not what happened here, I don't know what did. So shout out to Brian. He has been fantastic. He's done fantastic work in regards to stuff and breaking the stuff down. And I still don't, I got to be honest, it bugs me when people act like Trump's an infant. And they act like, oh my God, he knew nothing about this. He's just being pulled into this. And he doesn't have any choice in this. And it's like, dude, just stop. Just stop. He's a grown-ass man. If you want to call him a man-child, an evil man-child with a gun, I will go with the evil man-child with a gun with a radically overblown narcissistic disorder that should be treated with medication. I am here with my guest, the one, the only, Sabrina Sabs, or Sabby Sabs. Sabrina is a Boston-based activist, leftist, and podcaster. She's a member of the Revolutionary Blackout Network, a fantastic network, by the way, especially Nick Cruz also. A Black-led multicultural and co-op of everyday people, activists, and allies focused on empowering our communities through education, organizing, and direct action. Me giving a compliment threw me off. I was like, okay, where's my spot? How you doing? You doing okay this morning?
I'm doing great, Jamal, and so sorry about last week. Again, I've been so busy. I totally overslept, slept past my alarm.
Perfectly
but
fine.
I'm here.
You're perfectly fine. I've done it myself on occasion. I think once. I've done it once. I forget the network or the show I was supposed to be on, but I was unconscious. So I do get it. But I'm glad you could join me. And there's a lot of news to hit. Let's not do foreign policy. Let's go into Mamdani for a bit. I am super curious on your take on him, especially since you cover domestic politics and cover it heavily. Were you, and surprise is probably not the right word for it, I'm asking a question that I know the answer to in order as a lead-in. The amount of hate that he got from his own party. Like they wouldn't even acknowledge his win, or at the very least, they didn't want to acknowledge his win or support of him, despite the fact that he won overwhelmingly in the mayoral race, creating a heavy upset. And it wasn't just creating a heavy upset. He didn't back down on various issues. So when all of these other people on stage are like, yes, I'm totally going to Tel Aviv and bend over to let Netanyahu sniff my ass. And he's like, yeah, I'm an American, I'm staying here. It's like, I'm going to focus on issues here. And they're like, oh my God, you're not going to let Netanyahu sniff your ass. You're not going to do that. Like, for one, it's weird that all of them show this kind of slavish devotion to another country like that. That is bizarre to me. That seems radically anti-American. And two, it seems even weirder that for him to say, well, yeah, I'm going to stick with America and deal with issues here. And they're horrified by it. That's even weirder. Like, I can't tell if it's because he's a democratic socialist that they hate him, or if it's because he was resolute and not necessarily going down that hole. I don't know which one they hate him for the most. Give me your thoughts on him, by the way. What are your thoughts?
I think it's both reasons. His refusal to want to go to Israel, and also because he's a democratic socialist. Don't forget, he also ran on BDS. So he supports BDS. That's another controversial issue for those who support Israel, obviously. But no, I'm not surprised they went against him. You and I went through this. You were a podcaster at the time. At the time, I wasn't a podcaster. But during the Bernie movement, we watched the entire party go against the most popular candidate, in 2016, 2020. So I'm not surprised. He doesn't fit the mold that the establishment wants, right? Like, number one, again, running on BDS, saying that you're not going to go to Israel. But I think that a lot of politicians should take note, because his whole thing is that I'm going to focus on what New Yorkers need, right? Isn't that how Donald Trump won? So
That's what Trump said. That's what he said.
These are the things that they overlook, like focusing on what's happening right here at home and making that priority. So that's another thing. Also, this was supposed to be a shoo-in for Andrew Cuomo. Was supposed to be. The establishment was gung-ho behind Andrew Cuomo, but I think they underestimated young voters. They underestimated, like, for Mamdani, I think a lot of people may remember this, but Jamal and I remember the excitement that was around AOC when AOC, first ran for Congress. So I think for Gen Z, like, this is their AOC. So we're seeing another generation kind of have that candidate come forward and he won the primary. He would have to win the general, but we're seeing that happen with another generation. So for those who could not vote for AOC when she ran in 2018, Mamdani to them is their AOC. Now, I caution people, because I went through this here in Boston. a lot of these DSA progressive type candidates, I would say since 2018, they run on progressive policies, but when they win, they operate like the typical establishment politician.
Right.
You can look at Chicago. People forget this, but Mayor Brandon Johnson ran as a socialist. He is not governed like one. He's fit right in with the establishment. You know, there's a lot of people in Chicago not too happy about Brandon Johnson's, leadership.
Yeah.
Mayor Michelle Wu, right here in Boston, who everybody seems to be praising and who Zoran praised. And I caution people about this. She ran on a housing first agenda. She also, like Zoran said, we're going to get the rents down. We're going to create more affordable housing. But when she won, she caved to developers. She caved to big business and banks. And I think I just caution people, because here's the thing. He is not, Democrat leadership, right? He is telling people one of the things that he wants to do is to have free public transportation, which is totally doable, by the way, for people who don't know. Even in Baltimore, there's a bus that is free for that downtown area in Baltimore. So some of these things have already been applied in other cities, just FYI. But what he needs to explain to people is that some of these policies can only be enacted by the governor's approval. And that is Governor Kathy Hochul. Like with public transportation, that is owned by the state. So he may want to have free buses or whatever, but ultimately Governor Hochul would have to approve that. And I say he needs to tell people this, that a lot of these policies that he wants to accomplish have to be approved by the governor, is because if he does win and these things don't happen, this is where the disappointment comes in, right, Jamal? Where people get disappointed because you said you were going to do these things and now they're not happening. I just think that political candidates have to be 100% transparent about what needs to take place for these policies to be implemented. And oftentimes that's not the case. So I caution people about that. So my statement to people, and I'm hosting a panel about this tonight, my statement to people is that I understand that people are excited. Like, people want lower rent. People need their rent to be lower. Like, New York is very expensive. People need those things. But I caution people, number one, please do not look at Zoran as a hero, as a savior. And I already see it happening, just like it did with AOC. You have to remember that he is a politician. And I believe that what will happen if he does win, I think he'll end up governing more in a moderate type way. He won't be able to implement most of these things. That's the reality, because the governor's not going to approve it. So I would caution people with that. Like, don't look at him as a hero. Don't look at him as a savior. See him as a politician, and he will be flawed.
Yes. And to understand that this gets complicated, right? They want him to fail, meaning if he gets elected, I don't foresee the governor helping him in any sense of the word. They hate his guts every bit as much as they hated Sanders' guts, and every bit as much as they hated AOC's guts. If you remember, when AOC got elected, she was like, we're going to primary some folks. We need to get some of these people out of here. And the Democratic Party, their response is, if you are part of the DCCC or the DSCC and you assist in primarying a candidate, you will be blacklisted. Meaning she wouldn't have even been elected under that model if indeed her campaign was blacklisted from using all of these kind of democratic devices they effectively use to get elected. And so at some point, AOC got her mind right? When she became a good little soldier, Nancy Pelosi's soldier. But that's not where she started. She started with, we need to primary some folks. He is in a weirder position because he doesn't really control all of these things, as you point out, that he wants to do. And so it's like, okay, well, where are you getting the money from? Where are you going to get, how do you get the governor to do something when the governor hates your guts and wants you to fail? And the reason I'm saying that is because I saw what they did with Sanders. They hate it. I remember Chris Matthews pointed out that maybe it's better for Trump to win as opposed to Sanders to win, because Sanders would take the party for a generation. And he didn't want Sanders to be successful in that regard. Listen to how they talk about him. Do you honestly think they're going to either do him any favors? They're talking about Eric Adams, for God's sake, as radically unpopular as he is running. They're talking about giving Cuomo money to run. You have billionaires saying, we'll give whatever money you need in order to beat him and stop him from winning. Let's say he does win. Is it in their best interest for him to fail or to succeed as what he is? Fail. So he is going to have an uphill climb. So I guess I'm saying I agree with you. He is, I went into that saying, for me, I like to do balls and strikes. Did you accomplish this? Did you accomplish this? Did you accomplish this? He's going to have a hard go of it. Either way you look at it. Either way you look at it.
It's the system as a whole. I think people have to understand that what I just mentioned there about the governor, that shows you have to change the whole system. Like,
Yes.
it's not enough to get a candidate, a mayor, politician that wants to implement those policies. The governor has to be on board as well. This is the part I think a lot of people don't understand. Even when you have like these, even with Bernie, some of the things he said he wanted to do as president, he would need to get the approval of Congress in order to do that. So the
Yes.
whole system has to be changed.
But it goes beyond, let's emphasize system, not just people. Because, let's say Sanders got elected. At some point, in order for him to accomplish what he wanted to, he is going to have to touch a hot stove of the capitalistic system itself. Because some of that stuff, what happens when Sanders makes a policy and the stock market drops 1,000 points a day? Look at what Trump did, right? Trump just so happened didn't care. But even somebody who just didn't care ends up bending the knee as the bond market starts to collapse and faith in the credit, the American currency starts ticking down. And the people around Trump are freaking out saying, hey, you have to stop. Even Trump, who could care less, had to effectively stop what he was doing because he was concerned about the stock market. With Sanders being different, I think Sanders will capitulate faster, frankly.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's the thing. And also Ukraine. Remember what Donald Trump said when he was running, how he would stop it on day one?
yeah,
He's giving Ukraine weapons and money just like Joe Biden did.
yeah.
So they all fall in line or they're gone.
It's a system. I mean, because you have to really think, even if those people got into a position and they wanted to change, meaning let's say that he believes everything he's saying. And let's say AOC believed everything she was saying. And even the other candidate, Brandon Johnson, and the other candidate, I think, Margaret Wu. Let's say all of these people believed everything they said. Something clearly changed when they got in office.
Right, because they're not actually in charge.
Yes and no. I mean, I strongly suspect that there is leverage that is applied to people when they get in office, where there's a logic that compels their behavior. Like where it's like they understand, okay, if I don't do this, this other thing happens. The public doesn't quite get the other thing that happens, but me in my position can see it, and I need to respond to it. And nobody, I hope that makes sense. Like, even if I give them the benefit of the doubt, I would wager to you that there is something systemic that creates the conditions that these people encounter because they're so different, and yet they come to the same conclusions.
It's the money. It's the money. And this is why I continue to say that until you get corporate money out of electoral politics, these things, the system itself isn't going to fundamentally change because the parties are run by big money interests. Even though some of the candidates have grassroots campaigns, it doesn't matter because the party that they're a part of is controlled by big money interests. So until you get corporate money out of electoral politics, this is always going to continue to be a problem. Another thing that was brought to my attention, speaking of Zoran, for example, and we want to talk about the money, is the connection that he had to a Peter Thiel fellow. I mean, all these people run in like circles, and there's some things to be said, I think, about DSA. These are the things I've noticed over the years. It's very clear to me that DSA caters to a certain demographic, right? Like if you look at the neighborhoods and the demographics that Zoran won, he didn't win working class and lower income voters. He won middle class, upper middle class, and wealthy voters. Like the numbers show you who he actually won. And I think that says something too. Like Andrew Cuomo won the lower class neighborhoods, the lower income neighborhoods, and Zoran didn't. And that's because, and I've been saying this for years, that the DSA, organization, they don't go into these lower income and poor neighborhoods. And someone like Andrew Cuomo, who's lived there for a long time and has basically like a family legacy there in the political sphere, he has that type of relationship with those lower income communities. Remember, his father was also a politician. See, people forget this sometimes. So I think that there's something to be said about that, about the DSA style candidate that is not making those inroads in those working class, lower income neighborhoods. I think that does speak volumes. Like, your organization can't just be, professional managerial class people. It can't. And you see this in different DSA chapters. The DSA chapter, even here in Boston, if you were to go to a DSA meeting, everybody graduated from Boston College, Harvard, BU, MIT. It's like, where are you're running on and supporting these issues that greatly would benefit people that are lower income, but they're not a part of your organization. And this is why they tend to lose those people. So I think there's something to be said for that, because considering the policies that he had, there's no reason why he shouldn't have won those lower income voters, but they're not present in those neighborhoods. So that needs to be said. And I think that's something that DSA really needs to try to change.
Agree-ish. Like, I know Black voters have a tendency to, I used to say, keep the monsters at bay. Meaning African Americans will vote for who can keep the monsters at bay. And so there's a test of legitimacy, this kind of subjective, subconscious test of legitimacy that African Americans use when they're looking to make a vote. Now, I'm taking out 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds out of this because they tend to be a little bit different. But I know when I grew up, you only voted Democrat. You didn't even need to know who the Democrat was. It would just get your vote just because it was a Democrat. And if there was somebody on the ballot with a DSA, well, I don't know what a DSA is. If there was somebody with, farmers, whatever, I don't know what that is. Who's the Democrat? Meaning, it's very possible that the African-American community looked at him and thought to themselves, this Muslim has no chance of winning. And if you think from the standpoint of Obama, when Obama was running, well, Hillary Clinton was the person that the Black people were voting for at the very beginning until Obama won Iowa. Same thing with Sanders. If you look at the way Sanders ran his campaign, his policies obviously would have went better for the African-American community. But I watched when Al Sharpton took Bernie Sanders to church for a campaign event. Everybody in that room was Black. Sanders was preaching hard. And they would say, I agree with him, but there would be a but behind it, where Hillary Clinton would walk out there with the vote. Give me your take on that.
But it's not just that, though. Like Zoran's, even they've been talking about this recently. Zoran's campaign, he was just in Harlem the other day.
Yeah.
He's there now. See, that's what I'm talking about. That campaign did not go into those neighborhoods. This is something they're admitting is all over the media about why didn't they go to those lower income neighborhoods. And then with New York, I think it's a little bit different because, like, for example, the Bronx, which is huge, the Bronx is pretty diverse.
Yeah.
Racially is pretty diverse. So I feel like there's no excuse. You can't come into those neighborhoods just when you're running a campaign. The people need to see that you're active within the community when you're not running a campaign. And I think that's the big difference. Remember, people they're less likely to trust you if they don't see you. So that is something that I think that they need to do differently. Like, you have to go to those areas and you can't just show up and say, hey, I'm running for, such and such. But you've lived here all these years, and the people in the neighborhood, they never see you. They don't know you. This is why, and this is another thing I think some people don't understand. This is why Eric Adams was able to win the first time, because the people, they do know him. They know him. They see him. He's there. He's a corrupt. He's corrupt politician. I can't even believe he's running again. But
that's shocking,
corrupt.
Right? That is mind blowing to me.
Corrupt.
Again. Yeah,
Cuomo
he has
also very corrupt, but people are more likely to trust someone that they know and they've seen around instead of the new guy that, hey, I'm running for office. So that's something to take into consideration. Like, those policies greatly benefit people who are lower income. Yeah. And it says something. Like, it was upsetting, I think, for a lot of people to see that Andrew Cuomo was able to win those neighborhoods. I'm like, he doesn't have anything policy wise for you.
Yep.
What are you doing? Eric Adams, by the way, for people who are not aware, the rent in New York increased by 9% under Eric Adams' leadership.
By the way, Ted Raw pays, I think he said $5,000 a month for rent.
I believe it.
$5,000. I can't. I lived in DC and I thought our rent was rough. I can't fathom that. And like, how do you work at Starbucks and afford rent in DC, in New York? I don't even know how they did it in DC.
Most people have roommates. I mean, most people do. It's the same thing here in Boston too. Most people have roommates. I only know one person. This is the funny part. I only know one person of all the years I've lived here that lives in Boston that doesn't have a roommate, and they're a nurse practitioner. Other than that, everybody I know has a roommate.
So it's kind of like Friends. Was like 5 people living in one apartment.
Roommates, another like it reminds. It's like, and I'm talking about people in their 30s, in their 40s, not people in their 20s.
That's mind blowing. That is just mind blowing to me. I couldn't believe Ted when he told me that, but I don't think he's lying. I don't see why he would. And his point is, it's like, dude, New York is gone to shit, and yet the rents still go up. And he was like, many of these apartments are empty, and yet the rent still goes up. And then, of course, when you bring it to Eric Adams, like people don't want a handout. Dude, if you're paying $5,000 a month rent, that's not a handout. That's being ripped off. Rent to your class. It's just
Eric Adams knows that. Like he's an old school New Yorker. So he knows that New York is ridiculously expensive now. He knows that. Same thing with Andrew Cuomo. Like they know, but they can afford it.
Yeah, these people don't care. I just don't think they care. I think they look at being a politician as a job, not to do, and if that makes sense. Like if I get a job as a software engineer and my job is to write code, I think they look at this stuff as almost like aristocracy. It like Frank Herbert. I know I bring up Frank Herbert. The last of my audience is probably rolling their eyes. He brings up and makes this point that liberals and aristocrats are closet aristocrats. That is like if you scratch a liberal, you'll find an aristocrat. That they don't seem to look at this job as to actively do. So it's not like I'm getting this job to lower the rent or I'm getting this job to make things affordable. It's I'm getting this job to have this job as if you don't have a function in that job. It's very strange, but that's what it seems like. I don't even know why he's running again, frankly. I don't even know why Cuomo's running again. Cuomo got all those grandmas killed, for one, during COVID, lied about it. 2, was doing these fake pressers, ignoring the fact that he cut the numbers in half, got an Emmy for that nonsense, and then got taken out of office, not for getting all of these people killed, but because he couldn't keep his hands to himself. And yet comes back for his political reawakening and nearly wins.
Yeah, let's all remember 11 different women accused Andrew Cuomo. It's not like just one person. I don't even think Andrew Cuomo wants to be mayor. I think he was told to do it. Like he doesn't come across to me as someone who actually wants that job. He doesn't even seem excited about it. When you see him do interviews, when you see these press appearances that he's done, even when he spoke recently with Al Sharpton, who's another one that I think just needs to step aside and just get out of the way. Retire, Al, just step aside. But he doesn't look like he doesn't look excited for this job.
He might not be. I mean, but it might that's what I mean when I said for him, it may be a job. Like he was a governor. I think in his mind, his next step is president. It's kind of like if somebody did radio or TV and then they get a job on radio. Okay, did they really want that job on radio? Like, do they really consider, you know what I mean? Like for him, this is him making a comeback. This is him falling behind from where he actually was. He probably never wanted to be mayor. He probably wants to be president. That's where his aspirations were, not here. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
but
it's laughable to me because, and what was interesting about this, and this goes to show you the partisan politics. Some of the same people who said Donald Trump is a criminal, he should not be able to run again. So is Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo is very, very corrupt. No, he's not in jail, but he should have been. He killed all those people at the nursing home. But now it's okay because it's your party. This is the
Yeah.
frustration that I have. I think with the two-party system is like all these people, Donald Trump, Andrew Cuomo, Eric Adams, they're all corrupt. Eric Adams misused campaign funds. How was he allowed to run for office again? Because Donald Trump gave him a pardon? Why are
Pretty
people
much.
willing to vote for and support corrupt people, openly corrupt people?
And Sabrina, I think that's kind of my point. Like, it's almost as if the public doesn't expect them to do, and so they don't feel they need to do. Like, for example, if somebody gets it, let's say, for example, the rents are high. So Mandani says, I'm going to get in, I'm going to do something about the rents. Okay, that's a very specific objective that you can either say he accomplished it or he didn't accomplish it. If he didn't accomplish it, maybe you go to somebody else. But if you remember when Clinton ran, she wasn't running on anything. Joe Biden wasn't running on anything. Harris wasn't running on anything. These people just wanted to be in office. And I get the same sense from Adams when he's attacking Mandani, saying, well, the public doesn't want a handout. Okay, then dude, why are you even trying to run? Like, what are you running on? You were at the club most of the time, at the very least when I became aware of you, or being indicted for some federal, for crimes dealing with campaign stuff. So what is their purpose in doing this? What is Cuomo running on? Nothing.
Israel.
Well, that. But I guess my point is, it's not like they're running to do anything, and it's not like the public demands of them to do stuff. Cuomo was going to win that race if Mamdani wasn't in the race. He would have won it. That's mind blowing. But he would have won that race. It's like the public had no responsibilities associated with him running, and they would have just gifted him the office just because you needed to gift somebody the office. It's bizarre. That's not the way politics should run.
And the polls show right now with Eric Adams now in the race, Andrew Cuomo is ahead of Eric Adams.
Are you serious?
Dead serious.
Just wow. Just wow. Just absolutely wow. I would like to talk about your documentary. It's called Removed. Now, is it up yet? It says, thank you for the name of my documentary, Removed, about gentrification in Boston. Are you open to talk about it? I didn't bring this up to you in advance. I saw on your page that you told me you were doing a documentary. Then I saw the item and the topic. Is this something you can talk about, or you want to wait till it comes out?
Yeah, I can talk about it a little bit.
Okay.
So basically, to make a long story short, we're almost done filming. I've been getting different footage here and there. That's why that's why I've been tired.
Perfectly fine. Look, trust me, after the show, I have to cut videos. It's 7 p.m. when I start. It's 10 p.m. when I finish. When I finish cutting videos, like 3 in the morning. And having time to do anything in the morning, it just becomes a pain. So I feel where you're coming from on that. I totally get you. I don't begrudge you on this.
Yeah, we're almost done filming, and I've been very, very fortunate to have a professional editor, and that's really made the big difference. But the documentary is about gentrification in Boston, and this is happening in major cities all across the country. But I think what a lot of people don't understand is that there are certain neighborhoods in Boston where there was people that were priced out, but there's also forced removal from the city. And I think there's a big difference there. There are some that say that they are displaced because they were priced out. The rents increased and they had to leave. But
Right.
And then there are those that were displaced because of eminent domain, because the city forcefully moved them out. And I think there is a difference between the two, and this continues to happen today. There's a big issue here happening in Boston about the U.S. women's soccer team. I don't know if everybody knows about this, but Mayor Michelle Wu has decided to move forward with this project. Her competitor, Josh Kraft, who is also known as, I don't know what happened to Jamal, but her competitor,
I'm still here. I was giving you I'm sorry. I'm still here.
Okay.
I was giving you the platform. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I was like, what happened to him?
No, I was giving you the space. I'm sorry.
Her competitor, Josh Kraft, who is the son of Robert Kraft, who owns the New England Patriots,
Okay.
also wants this U.S. Women's Soccer League here. Now, there's differences between where they want that to be, but this particular project, they are forcefully taking over a stadium in a Black neighborhood. That stadium was used for the public schools, for the kids to be able to like do their sports and stuff at the public schools at that stadium, etc. They are taking that over, taking it from the community to give it to a U.S. women's soccer league that they don't even live here. I think people need to understand that what has happened, and if you haven't lived here, you may not know this. What this city has done to Black neighborhoods in Boston is criminal. How they have forcefully moved people out against their will, took their homes, and gave that area to big business, to professionals, and to college graduates graduating from these elite institutions right here. And it's still happening now. This is not something that was just in the past. So in the documentary, what we go through is how we were able to get to gentrification, because I think what people may not know is that there are certain policies that were enacted decades ago that led to gentrification. And that's why you have it. Now, this type of thing is happening in major cities all across the country, right? Like you can see it very visibly in Washington, D.C. You can see it in New York. We were just talking about New York, right? Like Brooklyn. I remember when I lived in Brooklyn, it didn't look like that. Williamsburg has been heavily, heavily gentrified. And I think what people have to understand is that this is totally changing what this area was. These cities are becoming a playground for big business and the rich and the college graduates that graduate from these universities. They want the cities to be for them. The people who grew up here that are working class. Boston used to be a working class city. It used to be that you could have a blue collar job, have a family here. The triple deckers that you see in Boston, at one point, it used to be that an entire family would live in that triple decker and they would have different apartments. So one on the first floor, second floor, and the top floor. Everything is about micro units now. Everything is being condensed down, but the price is higher. So you have less space, but they're increasing the cost. And it's very troubling. And so if you come here as a visitor, you're not going to know about this. They're not going to take you to those neighborhoods. If you do a duck boat tour, they're not taking you to the parts of Roxbury and Dorchester where I have been filming. They don't want you to see that. They don't want you to see how they've knocked down schools, how they've taken apartment buildings. They don't want you to know how they ran a highway through a neighborhood. All of these things together. And so I think it's a unique story with Boston in the sense that, because a lot of times people come here and they say, where are all the Black people? A lot of them have been forcefully removed by the city. And the ones that are still here, it's like the city hides them. They are so far south of the city that if you came here as a visitor, you would never go there. And I think it says a lot. So people need to know and understand not just the history, but what they're doing right now. And it doesn't matter who the mayor is. This has happened under Mayor Michelle Wu. It happened under Mayor Marty Walsh, who left and went to go work for the Biden administration. Again, he was born and raised here. Yeah. It happened under Mayor Menino. This has been happening for years, but they're taking people and saying, we are taking your home. You got to go. We'll give you this voucher so that you can go live south of the city. But if you don't have a car, how are you going to get into the city? It's shocking. I think what people are going to see.
Is race an allegory for wealth in this? Like, meaning certain parts of the community just so happen to be poor. And so every incentive in the world is for them to maximize cash. And in maximizing the amount of money that the city is getting, they're like, okay, this area is prime real estate. Let's move these people out. Let's rebuild this. Let's allow a different type of group to come in. Let's bring in businesses. Meaning this is about cash, ultimately. Like, how does a city maximize its cash, which is the reason why it didn't really matter to the mayor. Even if the mayor is coming in saying she's a socialist, she's stuck with the forces that she's working with, unless there's a clear objective to not let that happen. And it seems like there hasn't been a clear objective to not let that happen.
Well, this has been happening. I mean, this goes all the way back to white flight. Like, this didn't just start happening today.
Right.
Where they have been forcefully taking Black communities. Like, and I've been talking about this for quite some time. And I think it's one of those things, like, you're just going to have to see the documentary to see it in practice. Because I think where Boston may be a little bit different is that there were poor white neighborhoods in Boston, for people who are not aware, right? Like, there's still Southie, we call it Southie, but South Boston was an Irish Catholic neighborhood. Now there's gentrification that has happened there too, but I noticed even in Southie, they still kept the projects there. That's what a lot of people may not know.
I see what you mean.
The projects in South Boston, they're still there, but they're kind of like, I hate to say it, but it's like they put it on the outside of the neighborhood, as if like, you know, so if you go through the main street, which is Broadway, you're not going to see it. But if you turn down one of the side streets and go further towards the beach, then you will, run into those areas. But those projects, are still there. But there were certain things that were done to Black neighborhoods here in Boston that were race-based. One of the things that we get into is the redlining. And I think that's what people have to understand too, how redlining led to gentrification and how urban renewal also led to gentrification. So there's a lot of context that comes in, but I think that it's sad. I think having lived down south, there is a difference. The type of racism that you see in the South is overt. You don't have to question it. It's very clear what's happening. The type of racism you see in the Northeast tends to be more covert. It's a little bit more subtle. And in particular in Boston, it's structural racism. It's structural racism to the point where they won't have subway stops in Black neighborhoods, things like that. So that you have to take like 3 buses. If you're a kid and you live in Dorchester, if you're not right next to Ashmont and you live in Dorchester, you have to take 3 buses just to get to school. It's things like that. It's tearing down the schools in the Black neighborhoods and telling the parents of the kids that they can test into a charter school if they get the correct score and they get in to go to that charter school. Or you can enroll in the education lottery. And if you win, then your child will be put on a bus and sent on the highway to go to school in Newton, Massachusetts, which is a very wealthy city right outside of Boston. So it's things like that. And I don't think a lot of people realize that there's still busing here in Boston. These types of things, like, now, no, it's not mandated by the state, but the fact that they chose to tear down the schools instead of fixing up the schools and tell these parents, put your kid gets on this bus and they go to school in this wealthy town with the kids that they have nothing in common with, then they have to get back on that bus, get back on the highway and come back home to Roxbury, come back home to Dorchester. It's that type of thing. So if you're playing an after school activity, who's going to come pick you up after school when your parents don't have the transportation to get to Newton? They got to get on a train and a bus and a this and a that just to come pick you up for after school activities in a town where you don't know nobody there. So it's things like that where the institutions and the very systems that are in place are designed in such a way to make it more difficult for Black neighborhoods. It's as if they want them to be forgotten. And I think that's the big difference here. Because the reality is, if you are to the south of the city and you're not within what we call Boston proper, things are going to be more difficult for you.
Yeah. And that's effectively where they're kicking people out of Boston proper and sending them to the outskirts of the city. Wow.
And out of the city altogether. I mean, it's a lot that's happening here, but there was an article about it recently. It was talking about how more Black people they're leaving the city, they're forced out. And so that also means that you have a longer commute because most of the jobs are in the city, right? So you need a car. If you don't have a car, I don't know. Like, our public transportation system here isn't like New York. I don't know if people realize that. New York has 24-hour, public transportation. It's not like that here. So imagine if you work third shift. Imagine if you work at a hospital, you're a CNA or you're a nurse and you work third shift. You may be able to get to work, but you can't take the subway home.
Mhm. See, Richmond doesn't have a subway. Richmond, Virginia. Like, so DC has one, kind of, but it's not as advanced as New York's, where New York pretty much goes everywhere. So I don't know how Boston's is set up, but you're not wrong, though, depending upon where you live. Like, that kind of goes back to the question, how does somebody work at a coffee shop and then live here? And the answer is they don't. And then that secondary question of, okay, well, how do they get here if they work here? Like, all of those problems start to just creep into it the moment that the city becomes that expensive to live in. And I can imagine Boston comes across to me as very expensive, just like a New York or just like a DC. Wow.
Yeah, I think there's just so much that again, like I said, if you come here as a visitor, as a tourist,
You don't see it.
you're not going to see this, and you're not told about it. I feel like the city does a good job of hiding it. But for those of us that grew up here or have lived here I've lived here since 2011. I've been here for a long time. So for those of us that have lived here or grew up here, you know about it. And it's just, you constantly see the city creating new developments at the expense of the removal of Black people. That's how they create the new developments. And that's the part the city doesn't want to tell you.
By the way, does this come up politically? Like, is this, like, for example, in California, I was shocked at the level of homelessness in California. Like, if you're in, let's say, like Los Angeles, when they sent me to cover, what was it, Something of the Americas, and had a nice hotel, and outside the hotel was a guy doing heroin or doing crack or something. And you're like, whoa, this is my first time seeing a crackhead, like, in the act of doing crack. And you would see vows broken all over the place. Hundreds of thousands of people living on the streets. Like, California's, I've never seen anything like it. And I guess my thing is, in their case, in their situation, it just doesn't seem to come up. Like, if you're talking to people in the cab, or if you're talking to people who are there and you're just having conversations with them, and it's like, hey, how you have this many people that are homeless and you're supposed to be a supermajority Democrat state? Like, how does that work? If you're supposedly the lefties of the country, how the hell do you have this many people living on the streets? And they're like, it doesn't come up. It's just ignored. Is that what is happening in regards to the political space, where this is just one of those things that doesn't come up? It's almost like an automatic, like a train that is moving in a particular direction that doesn't seem to break through politically as being one of the main issues. Kind of like rent in New York, where rent became an issue in a political sense, but this, not so much.
The mayor pushes them around the city. They do homeless encampment sweeps. So 1 month they may be right outside of Boston Medical Center. That's where you'll see a lot of homeless people, but they've been trying to push them out of that area.
Well, no, I'm sorry. I just mean the housing issue, this gentrification, the moving people, the forcing people, using eminent domain laws, or for that matter, pricing people out. I guess I'm asking, I was using homelessness in California as an example of the way something is a main political issue that is just not brought up as an issue. I'm saying, is the gentrification issue or the pricing issue for rents, is that just also similar to the homeless issue in California, where this is just something that's not brought up? People are aware of it, but nothing is done about it politically.
Well, the rent issue is brought up politically over and over again. In fact, Mayor Wu ran on that. That was her big thing. She said she was going to fix the housing issue. She was going to build more affordable housing. But what they don't tell you is the affordable housing unit, a lot of those buildings, the minimum income is $100,000 a year. See, they don't tell you that part. The affordable housing isn't really affordable. It's not really, it's not for that. That's the part people have to understand. It's not for like, it's not for.
Are you telling me that they're putting affordable housing as $100,000 a year?
Yeah, this has been happening for years. Like, it's not for people that are lower income. It really isn't. It's for people, and I've been trying to get this across to people. It's for the college graduates. It's not for people that are lower income. And I think that a lot of people, more people have been talking about that. But the rent issue, yes, that has been a big thing politically. She's running for a re-election right now. They're bringing up rent again, and even she has admitted herself that she didn't do what she said she would do on the housing issue, but she's bought in with big developers. And then there's also something called city planning that I think people need to be aware of in their city, where there's zoning laws that are in place. So it's like you have all these different systems working together. But you can say one thing, but if you don't have the approval of, let's say, city planning, sometimes the governor has to agree on some of these things. Like, then these things are not going to happen. The gentrification issue is not a political thing. That's something they don't bring up because they want it. That's what people have to understand. These cities, DC, Boston, New York, Atlanta is experiencing this now. I was talking about this recently with a couple of guests that live in Atlanta. I guess Austin, Texas, Nashville's heading that way. All these major cities where gentrification is happening, you have to understand the politicians, the political space there want it to happen. They want these cities to benefit the recent college graduates. They're trying to keep them there. They want these cities to be for the professional managerial class and pushing everybody else out. They don't want it to be for the people who are lower income. I think the only exception I can see right now is back home in Baltimore. Baltimore has some gentrification, but not as heavy as it is here or in DC or New York. But for the most part, I've been warning people about this. When they come in and they say, we are creating green space, we are coming in to do more city planning and renewal, pay close attention to these words. Green space means that buildings are going to be knocked down so that you could have that green space. That includes buildings that people live in. Renewal means that out with the old, in with the new. That means you too. So if you were already there, in order for them to build that new space, that means they want you to get out too. This is what they don't say, but they sell it to the neighborhoods by telling them, we're going to make it look like this. And nothing's going to change for you, but it does change. So all of these things, and I got to warn people about this as well. Anytime you start seeing certain businesses come in, like, for example, Whole Foods, that's one. Juice bars, right? The spin cycle gyms. When these things start popping up, the breweries, which is another one, your neighborhood is being gentrified. And that means that your rent is going to increase. Now, that, like I said, that's one part of it. Yeah. But in Boston in particular, they knocked down Black apartments in Black neighborhoods to put a highway through and push people out. And they're doing it now. This U.S. Women's Soccer League that they want so badly to come here, that is going in a Black community. They are displacing Black people there. This is no different from when Barack Obama created that center in Chicago on the south side of Chicago. That also created gentrification and displaced Black people there. This is what is going to happen. So as they bring new things in, that means you got to go. And I think that's the best way to frame it to people. They want them out. I don't know if everybody has noticed this, but there's been this new trend of people moving back to the city. So people who are homeowners selling their homes, and some of them that are boomers moving back into the cities so they can kind of be where everything is at. So just keep that in mind, folks. There's been this throughout history where you had white flight, where white people left the cities and moved to the suburbs. And because of redlining, Black people weren't able to get into those suburban communities. Now you're seeing a reverse of that. And so if you don't have a car, this is going to be a problem for you. If you live in a place where you don't have public transportation, this is going to be a problem for you. And as renters, and most people rent, I mean, what are you supposed to do? Just keep moving to different apartments and signing new leases and having to pay 3 months rent up front everywhere you go? It's absolutely insane. So that's why you'll see that there's no sense of community. That's why, like, when people say, oh, I moved to this neighborhood, but I don't know anybody here. That's because the people who made it what it was, the people who were a part of the community, were forcefully pushed out. That's why you don't have that sense of community. What you have are people hopping around from neighborhood to neighborhood, apartment building to apartment building. And that's why you don't have that. So I think that when people say that we need to build stronger communities, we do. I 100% agree with that. But in order for that to happen, people have to be able to afford to live where they're living. There has to be jobs there. That's the big one. And then 2, you can't just come in and physically remove people.
Yeah. No, that's a tough one. I mean, because you do want, look, personally, I want people to be paid well. I want people to be able to afford where they live. I want their communities to be safe and secure. You can't have a really good school in a location if the location is in disrepute. This is kind of the James Baldwin thing, right? He was like, you can't build up a great school and have it in a horrible community. It's just going to bring the school down. You have to build up a better community than build the school. No, I get you on this. That is deeply unfair. And you're right. It is trying to pay 3 months rent after you've been kicked out of your place that you were perfectly comfortable in, that you were perfectly fine staying in, and then putting a highway through the middle of it. Oh, that is rough.
And these are families. It's not just like me and Jamal, right? Like like these are families, people who like grew up there, their kids, everybody goes to the same church. Like it just like they're moving like whole
wrecking
families.
their lives. Yeah. Yeah, it's wrecking their lives. Well, when is your documentary coming out, by the way? Just so people will know.
Hopefully, working with the editor, hopefully we'll be done by the end of July. Hopefully. I say that because we have things.
Hold her to it. Hold her to it, audience. The end of July. It's like, that's when you're going to act. July 31st. Where is it? Where is it? No, I look forward to listening to watching.
Yeah, we're going to try to get it on Tubi. We're going to try as well. So it'll automatically be on YouTube, but I have some licensing things to work out to see if I can get it on Tubi. So.
Oh man, it sounds like a labor of, I don't want to say labor of love because that sounds weird, but definitely something that you're passionate about. You clearly know the subject matter. I look forward to watching it. I really do. And hopefully we can talk about it when it's finally out in July. So thank you for this. Sabrina Sabs, or Sabby Sabs. She is a Boston-based activist, leftist, and podcaster. She is a member of the Revolutionary Blackout Network, a Black-led multicultural networking co-op of everyday people, activists, and allies focused on empowering communities through education, organization, and direct action. Sabby or Sabrina, thank you for this. You be safe, okay?
Thank you.
All righty, let's go from one damn good guest to another. I see my man in the background, Dimitri Lascaris. How you doing, my man? You doing okay today?
Feeling relieved that this war is on pause in Iran, but how you doing, Jamal?
I am not relieved. I'm very angsty. But let me bring you in first. Dimitri Lascaris, he's a lawyer, journalist, and activist from Montreal, Quebec. In 2020, Dimitri ran for the leadership of the Green Party of Canada. He is also host of, where's the name of that show? It's
Reason to Resist.
Thank you, Reason to Resist. Usually the thing is in my head. I need to put the thing in the calendar. Usually I just remember it. Reason to Resist. Check him out. He has a damn good show. I had the opportunity to look at some of the videos the other day. Fantastic work. Fantastic work. I am very angsty about stuff that's going on. Let me just say, I am glad that Iran was able to beat back tonight. The monster underestimated what it was going up against and trying to overthrow that government, because that's what it was trying to do. People should not get it twisted. This has nothing to do about nukes. This is everything to do about overthrowing a government that the U.S. has been looking at for the last 20-something years to try to overthrow. Taking rid of Syria, or getting rid of Syria, was their gateway to it. But they obviously haven't given up. And even when they did the quote-unquote ceasefire, Israel was still talking about attacking Iran during the ceasefire, pointing out that they murdered Nasrallah during a ceasefire, effectively saying the Ayatollah shouldn't feel safe. So, yeah, I'm very angsty about this. I don't believe for a moment that the U.S. has given up. They've filled Israel's coffers to the hilt with bombs and missiles as fast as they could give them weapons and whatnot. But on the other side of it, and I ask you this, do you think that Iran is going to be the death of Israel? I mean, they clearly seem to have bitten off more than they could chew with this. And Iran seems to have a pretty strong, resilient, apolitical system. And the people in that political system have become more fervently behind the government after seeing the U.S. effectively lie and attack them during negotiations. Give me your thoughts on that. What are your thoughts?
It's a complicated situation, Jamal. I think that the Israelis and the Trump administration are caught between fear and hubris right now, and I don't assume that they have a clear plan of how they're going to deal with the situation. They've seen that Iran can impose quite a severe cost upon Israel and U.S. military bases if it chooses to do so. It hasn't done that yet. And that they're pretty much defenseless to stop the Iranian ballistic missiles, particularly the more sophisticated ones. And by the way, let me just say about that, when I was in South Lebanon 5 times during the last 20 months, and I was in the occupied West Bank last March, I saw lots of structures that had been struck by Israeli missiles or bombs. And I'm no military expert, but I think it's important to understand exactly what the differences are between the munitions that Israel typically uses and those being used by Iran. So Israel is typically firing missiles from drones or warplanes that have a limited capacity to carry munitions. So, for example, there's no Israeli warplane that can carry these 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs that the U-2s reportedly dropped on Iran. And so while the cumulative effect of all of these munitions, because they've been given so many and they fired so many into Gaza and Lebanon, is devastating, a single strike is not in and of itself particularly devastating. It could kill, dozens of people, but it's not going to wreck an entire neighborhood. Iran is firing these gigantic. When I was in Iran last month, we went to the aerospace museum or park, and we were given a tour by an Iranian brigadier general. And you stand beside these things, and they're gigantic. They look like, some of them look like NASA rockets. At the top of them, they have these massive warheads. And they travel at Mach 5, Mach 10, Mach 12, reportedly. So when a single missile strikes a densely populated or built-up urban area, it can annihilate an entire block, an entire neighborhood easily. So the impact, both physically and psychologically upon the Israelis, I'm sure, has been quite severe. So to go back to the question, they know they can't deal with this threat. But on the other hand, I don't think they're going to stop either. So I've been asking myself the last couple of days, what is the most likely move on their part at this stage? I think certainly they will conduct covert warfare against Iran. That's going to continue. Through proxies, agents of the Mossad inside Iran, people they've corrupted with bribery. They probably still have some capacity to do damage with drones that have already been smuggled into the country. But I think that the greater concern I have is that they're not going to be able to resist the temptation to attempt to assassinate Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. That's perfectly consistent with their prior behavior, and they may have deluded themselves into thinking that if only they can get him. Israel Katz, the psychopathic defense minister of Israel, admitted after the ceasefire was entered into that they had actually tried to kill Khamenei and they failed. And I think in their own minds, they may think of this whole scheme to cause the collapse of the Islamic Republic failed only because we were not able to kill Khamenei. If only we can kill Khamenei. But these lunatics, if they do that, if they actually attempt it, or even worse, succeed, all hell is going to break loose. And it's not just going to be Iran. This is a figure of significant religious importance throughout the Muslim world, the Shia Muslim world in particular. Probably a lot of Sunni Muslims would be outraged by this as well. So at that point, I think all bets are off as to what would happen. The Middle East could very well explode in a conflagration of violence at that stage.
Yeah, not just the Middle East. Well, yeah, Pakistan may get involved, especially considering because I would imagine if you're a Muslim, something has to supersede this just kind of infighting. And Israel murdering the leader of, this faith in regards to this country just seems outlandish. It just seems outrageous. And you're right. Katz was like, we just didn't know where he was. But if we knew where he was, we would have taken a shot, which is mind-blowing. I don't think people realize how mind-blowing that is. This is a country or a colony of squatters of 8 million people who are committing a genocide, sitting here opining about murdering the leader of a country. And Iran is like, hey, you better be careful with that. We may decide to go after Benjamin Netanyahu. And from my point of view, why haven't you? I don't know why they have this restraint. I honestly, I don't. From my point of view, all of these people are targets. Katz is a target. Netanyahu is a target. Smotrich is a target. All of these people are fair game. It is a terrorist regime. Even if you need to, under your own laws, say we're perfectly fine with going after terrorists and we would show no compunction in killing terrorists. There you are. There's your targets. I have zero issue with this. I don't know why anyone has an issue with it, considering this is the rule set that Israel set themselves.
Well, they're terrorists with nukes. That's the problem. So I don't
Fair
know.
enough.
Yeah. So I don't know that the Islamic Republic would be showing this restraint if
They didn't have nukes.
Yeah, if they didn't have nukes. And I'm sure they did try to kill senior military personnel. You know, they not necessarily the prime minister, the defense minister, but they certainly went after the Mossad headquarters, the defense ministry.
Yes, they did.
You know, other vital assets of the military-industrial complex in Israel. And they probably did kill a few of these people. We're just not being told about it.
So you pointed out the capability of these weapons. This is probably one of my favorite videos. I call this the lights out video. Bam. You could see the speed relative to the other missiles that were coming down.
Just think about the kinetic energy of that
I
missile.
know.
Just amazing.
I like I said, it's my favorite video.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get a screensaver. That thing is like a light, and the lights just go out immediately as soon as it hits. And they were talking about like the damage that Haifa is not going to be operational until October. Tel Aviv, Jesus, is ruined in some respects. Like in some of those images, that place looks like Gaza. And from my understanding, Israeli media is pointing out that there are plenty of locations that are sensitive military installations that they have not disclosed that have gotten wrecked.
Well, yeah, the Nevatim Air Base is out in the Negev Desert,
Yep.
you know, Jamal. So that was a prime target. I'm sure they struck that numerous times.
Yeah.
But it's entirely possible that we'll never know exactly what they did to it. But for sure, it took severe hits, and I'm sure that bases in the Golan Heights also got smashed.
See, I guess that's why I ask: Is this the thing that kills Israel? Because I agree with you; they're trapped between ego, while simultaneously knowing. Because they haven't, I don't see, it doesn't come across to me that they've acknowledged that they were beaten. And as opposed to accepting that reality, they're still like, we're going to go in again, with the knowing that the US will follow them when they get into trouble, which is why I say I'm angsty. Because if Iran is not willing to keep going, and as you point out, both of these countries have nuclear power, nuclear weapons. Okay, so it's a restraint on some level because of both countries having nukes. So then the secondary question becomes, okay, well, what does Iran do? It seems like they've chosen the worst of both worlds. Not only, meaning you are saying we're going to refine uranium, but we're not going to get a bomb. Okay. So I understand why you're doing it. You're looking for some level of negotiating tactic. And you may even, this may bridge a gap. There may be a disagreement in the country on what you want to do. So this may be what you chose to do. But if you're not willing to get the bomb, then you're given a stalking course, pretext, like an argument that, they're trying to get nukes, whether you're trying to get nukes or not. Does that make sense? Like, it's a very weird placement. Well,
it's important, I think, to bear in mind that you have to enrich uranium simply to operate a civilian nuclear energy program.
Yes.
Uranium, and Iran has substantial uranium deposits itself. But in nature, as I understand it, uranium is not sufficiently refined in order to operate a civilian nuclear reactor. So you have to enrich to the level about, I think, 5%. Again, I'm not an expert in this regard. So they went to 60, but they went to 60 only. They went to 60 only after Trump tore up the JCPOA. And there are also non-military reasons to enrich well beyond 5%. If you want to have a medical research reactor, you need to get to at least 20%. And I understand that they even had a reactor that had uranium enriched for research purposes that was enriched to the level of 60% at some point in the history of their nuclear program. So, but yeah, I think the likely explanation for them going to 60% was to send a message to the West. They kind of put themselves in a situation of ambivalence where we could quickly get to a nuclear bomb if we wanted, so be careful, but we're not going to go there. I don't think that strategy has been successful. So it definitely didn't deter an attack. I think they would have been attacked. Yeah, they would have been attacked anyways, even if they hadn't done it. They still want an attack, right? They've been planning this out for decades to
It's a funny
Iran.
policy. That's all. It's like, we're going to create a deterrence by going to 60%, and we have a breakaway. And it's like, look, these guys are trying to get a nuke. No, we're not really trying to get a nuke. We're just having deterrence, just in case you attack us, and you get attacked anyway. Yeah. And so now it becomes, okay, so now you're going to go for the nuke. Yeah, we don't know yet. Dude, what do you mean you don't know yet? You better go for that nuke. You better haul ass to get that nuke. Like, I am of mind that they should have already had a nuke. It was you were in a rough neighborhood with a maniac colony surrounded by enemies. You better get that nuke. You better get that nuke. At least that was my point of view.
Yeah. We can't forget the fact that this is an Islamic republic. That I think that the leadership of this country is deeply committed to the principles of Islam as they understand them. And Ali Khamenei has said that this is a weapon that kills civilians and is therefore forbidden by Islamic principles. But I also understand this is also a subject matter in which I'm no expert, which is Islamic theology. But I also understand that there's a principle in Shia Muslim of adapting the canons of Islam to the circumstances. And so if circumstances change to a sufficient degree, Ali Khamenei, the Ayatollah, might well feel justified, consistently with his own religious convictions, in saying, well, we now need to have a nuclear weapon. And frankly, Jamal, I think you probably are in the same place as I am. It's like, what are you waiting for, man? I mean, they're going to destroy you. They're going to keep trying. They will not stop. They're like the ever-ready bunny, the batteries that never run out of charge. They're just going to keep coming and coming. They're like that Chucky doll from that C-grade Hollywood terror movie with the knife in his hand. They're just going to keep coming. So I mean, at some point you have to take the steps necessary to protect your nation.
You're telling our age, Dimitri. You're telling our age.
Exactly.
No, I agree with you. I got to be honest. Existence trumps religious law. From my point of view, call me a heretic. But your country needs to exist to practice any religion, first and foremost. And you are dealing with two nuclear powers, both of which are sociopaths, both of which are responsible for killing 400,000 people over the course of a year and a half, both responsible for knocking over governments in the Middle East, where all sorts of depravity have been used in those governments once they failed. It's like you have to know where you are, from my point of view, but we'll see. I mean, like they say, either you take the Libyan model or the North Korean model, and I would hope that they go with the North Korean model. So we'll see. From where do you think this goes from here, though? I mean, let's take out Iran for a bit. U.S. and Israeli strategy. All right, your plan didn't work the first time. You've tried to overthrow this government. Okay, that didn't work. You're rearming as fast as you possibly can. The president doesn't read anything, so he's easily manipulated, can be manipulated into strikes. And in the same way that you've attacked him the first time around, and you got Trump to jump in, because I don't think Trump wanted his hands on it. I think they told Trump, Israel can handle it. And that wasn't the case. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, now what? Israel is saying we're going back in. And I think in their minds, they know as a flat fact that Donald Trump is not going to let his colony go belly up, in which case they know they can pull the U.S. And I'm saying pull from the context of Trump. The other people, you don't have to pull anywhere. They're perfectly willing to go. But I think they're going to chip their tooth on Iran in this. But correct me if I'm wrong. I could be wrong. I strongly suspect they're going to chip their tooth on this. And Iran can't keep having this tit for tat. At some point, they're going to have to not allow themselves to be pecked to death.
Yeah, I think there's the overwhelming likelihood is that this is going to get much worse. And it might not happen the next week, might not happen the next month, but sometime perhaps in the next 6 to 12 months, certainly not more time than that. I believe this is going to get much worse because these people are hell-bent on domination of the entire region, and they're capable, as you quite rightly pointed out, Jamal, of committing any atrocity, any satanic behavior, disgusting, monstrous, mind-blowing depravity that the human mind can conjure. It's just unbelievable. There's really nothing these people are incapable of doing. So any rational person looking at the situation would say, this is going to blow up. There's no way they're going to stop. So, and we shouldn't assume that they have a plan that actually makes any sense, that they have a strategy, but I do think they're going to come back at Iran. And as I say, I think it's going to start with, continued terrorist attacks within the country, continued attempts to decapitate the leadership of the country. And eventually this is going to lead to an Iranian retaliation. And Israel is going to be made to suffer to a far greater degree, and Trump is going to rush in. And by the way, I think one of the reasons why Trump is so desperate to convince people that he really did obliterate, Iran's nuclear program, just a fantasy. I don't care what happened to Fordo. He did not obliterate Iran's capacity to enrich uranium. And they probably saved the hundreds of kilograms or whatever it is of 60% enriched uranium. In any event, Trump will be he doesn't want people to think that it failed, because then he will be forced by his own maximalist rhetoric to attack Iran again, and he's not ready to do that. Right. One thing they might be doing, by the way, and I have no evidence to back this up, but one of the things they might be doing, these lunatics, is they might be transferring covertly air defense systems from Europe, and particularly Ukraine, to Israel, convincing themselves that, hey, if we just double the number of Patriot batteries we have in the country, we'll be able to protect the country from these hypersonic ballistic missiles. Whatever. They will come back, and eventually I think there is going to be a blow up, and it's going to be ugly. It's going to be absolutely ugly. And that, I think, is going to be potentially the death knell of the U.S. empire in West Asia.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I do think there's this kind of diversification of concerns where, okay, we're going to let Europe take over the Russia one, we're going to give Israel the Middle Eastern one, and we're going to take over China. But it hasn't worked that way in practice. I mean, for one, Europe can't carry that burden. They would get eaten alive by the Russians. Two, Israel couldn't carry that burden. They would get eaten alive by Iran. I mean, the U.S. had to literally jump in and bail them out. And the U.S. hasn't even been able to pivot to China. And obviously, at this point, with the industrial base that China has, China would eat the U.S. alive. The U.S. has to actually get forces over there, for one, and those forces would get taken under the water, meaning it would immediately go to a nuclear conflict. And there's no way to really win that. This plan doesn't seem to be working all that well. Like the Queen can only move once, like one time, like a move, right? Yeah. Like she may be a powerful piece, but she can't defend everybody at once, which is effectively the position that the U.S. seems to be in right now, trying to cover all of these bases at once. This plan doesn't seem to be working.
There's an implicit recognition on their part, I think, that it's not working. In the decision that they've just made, these maniacs to increase their military spending to 5% of GDP. It's like, my God.
Yeah.
I did the math actually, Jamal. And
by the way, in 10 years, just to point out, in 10 years,
correct.
When Trump is probably dead in the grave. But good.
So there's that and something else. They're leaving themselves some wiggle room, because I think they understand this is going to be a Herculean task to raise military spending to that level. But let's suppose they were doing that today, that they were actually spending 5% of GDP. I did the math. I went to each NATO country. I looked at their 2024 GDP, multiplied it by 5%. It adds up to $2.46 trillion US a year.
Really?
Okay. Yes. Today in 2024 GDP figures. And the current military spending of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea is about $450 billion US. Okay, so that's less than 50% of current US military spending, and these maniacs are talking about taking it up to 2.46 trillion or whatever it's going to be in 2035. So I mean, what does that tell you? That tells you that they understand that they are woefully incapable of achieving their objectives. Of course, part of this is just we're going to enrich the military-industrial complex, and we need to keep Donald happy and all the rest of that. But there is, I think, a sincere desire on the part of Europe to remilitarize the leadership of Europe, because they know that they're very weak and they can't accomplish their hegemonic goals in the current state of things. But that's going to bankrupt them. Whatever chess move they make is going to end up in them losing the match. They simply don't have the financial and industrial capacity to dominate the non-Western world anymore.
There's this other angle to that too. U.S. weaponry is expensive, and it's not that great. I mean, like for all of this talk about the Patriot missiles or David's Arrow or whatever the hell they were using, Golden Dome, most of that stuff comes from the States. We supply them with many of these weapon systems. The Patriot system got schooled, and the new class of missiles that Iran was coming out with, they just couldn't touch them. I watched a missile get chased by a helicopter with one missile dodging through all of this air fire, bam, hit his target. And you think to yourself, okay, wow, that's humiliating in regards to your air defense. I've seen air defense batteries get taken out and then fire off after they get hit, basically taken out of commission. They are expensive weapons. And for the amount of, it's like, I think they were paying like $1 million or $3 million a missile for air defense or something like that. They fired 2 off, something to that effect. Whereas Iranian one missile might be $1 million. And so the amount that you're spending to defend is dramatically more than you're spending either for the drones or the missiles themselves. And the amount that they're producing is so minor in comparison to the amount that they use. I mean, they use 20 years worth within the course of 12 days? Okay, that's mind-blowing. That is a mind-blowing thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how, and my point in this is, and where's Europe buying weapons from? They're not buying it from the Russians. They're buying it from America. So the U.S. is like, we want you to put 5%, not because we want you to fight anybody, but because we want you to effectively buy our weapons. Mm-hmm. And we want you to buy our expensive weapons at that, which means the bang for the buck that you're going to get for those weapons because they're so expensive. In comparison to Russia, who spends, $80 billion on the military, or China, who spends $200 billion on the military, and yet they're outproducing all of the West together in regard to artillery and some of these other weapon systems. That dog doesn't hunt. That just doesn't seem to be. I don't know. They're going to try it.
Well, that's part of the reason why they're doomed, is because of the structure of their military production industries. So the military production in the countries I just mentioned, Iran, China, North Korea, and the Russian Federation, are essentially state-owned.
Right.
So they're not charging a price that is going to result in fabulous profits for these production enterprises, right? But there's no impetus in the West to change the model of military production. They're absolutely determined to preserve the current model, which is they rely upon for-private, manufacturers who are gouging them. It's just insanely. The Auditor General in Canada just put out a report. About a week before Mark Carney, Prime Minister Goldman Sachs, said we're going to spend 5% of our GDP by 2035 on the military, which said that there, of course, not surprising at all, that there are massive cost overruns in Canada's program to purchase F-35s from the United States. It's gone up by 50%, the cost, and at least 50%, and probably it's going to be 100 to 200% higher by the time that the damn things are actually delivered. And they don't even work well, The amount of maintenance you have to do on those F-35s to keep them in the air is stratospheric. I see no recognition in Western leadership that the whole way they arm themselves is fatally flawed and is going to bankrupt them. They're just going to continue with this model.
Yeah, they're capitalists. I mean, but they, even to their own detriment, they're capitalists. Like, you would think that, okay, you need weapon systems that work, that are inexpensive, and that are functional for the environment to which you find yourself. And then they produce an F-35 that only works 50% of the time and was ungodly expensive in regards to the overruns for the cost of those planes. I don't get it. They just, maybe it's because they don't really believe that they're going to be in these conflicts. Like, if you are the manufacturer, you want to sell a product. You don't really care about the war. You want to sell a product. And if it's expensive, if there are cost overruns, oh well, we make more profit off of that particular product. How is it going to function in war? Yeah, it's not our responsibility. That's your responsibility. We just want the profit. I don't know. I've thought that myself. Like, you would think that a defense industry in-house would be more, beneficial, especially from the standpoint of cost, especially from the standpoint of functionality of what you need your systems. But
I think that's true of every single. This is kind of. I tend to have a view that anything that is important to the well-being of the people, so whether it's security, whether it's food production, whether it's medicines, healthcare, should be under the control of the public, the state. It should not be. We shouldn't trust capitalists to deliver the things that are essential for our well-being. because they're going to screw you over, man. That's all there is to it.
Agreed. I want to go to Russia for a bit. So Lugansk has been fully liberated. At the very least, that's what Russia is saying. They're screaming it out in their media. Lugansk fully liberated. And they should scream it out in their media. It's an accomplishment at this point. But I think, whereas Putin might have started this under this idea of, okay, we might be able to negotiate, even though they lied at Minsk, we may still be able to get a negotiation. I don't think that's where they are. I think they've gotten to the point, for example, this is Mark Rutte. Is it Rutte or Rutte? I think it's Mark Rutte.
I think it's Rutte.
It's Rutte. Okay. So NATO secretary, listen to what he says here, because and I'm going to ask you why is he saying this? I'm going to ask you why is he saying this? Keep in mind, Trump has been going with this farcical tale of trying to make a deal with the Russians, which I don't believe. Or at the very least, I think he wants to make a deal under the terms of a US president, if that makes sense. Meaning, you're in a losing position trying to act as if you're not. And losers don't get to dictate terms. And Trump is trying to dictate terms, which means that there is no deal. But listen to what he is saying here. And I want to ask you, why is he saying this? Give me your take on why he's saying this.
All of this brings Ukraine closer to NATO. It's building the bridge. And it means that you can count on us now and in the future, so that you can defend yourself, that you are stronger at the negotiating table, that you can deter aggression in the future, and on your irreversible path into NATO. We support you now and throughout the challenges ahead. No one deserves peace more than Ukraine.
You know, from the last Washington summit, I think it was 60 pages, 19 paragraphs. It will be considerably more condensed than that. And that means that you do not always have to repeat every sentence and every previous made commitment because it stands. The strategic concept stands. The Washington communique stands. So the irreversible path of Ukraine into NATO is there. And it is my assumption that it is still there after the summit, whether it is again in the communique or not.
So I'm fascinated by that. Donald Trump is at least trying to pull this fig leaf out as if, nope, Ukraine is not going to be in NATO. Ukraine is not going to be in NATO. Ukraine is not going to be under NATO. And Europe, every opportunity is making a point. Even right there, he's like, look, just because we don't say it doesn't mean that we're not inexorably moving in the direction of you being in NATO. Now, that was Colonel Daniel Davis on his channel playing the video. And he asked, why would they do this? They're obviously losing this war. Russia is clearly destroying Ukraine at this point. I have my idea as to why he's doing that, but I'm curious on why you think he's doing that.
Man, it's hard to say. I mean, I think probably they're so politically invested in Ukraine becoming a member of NATO that any acknowledgement, especially the European leaders, right? They've been saying since 2008, this is going to happen. Russia has no right to dictate. Ukraine is a sovereign state. We want them to be in. They deserve to be in. Blah, blah, blah. They're so politically invested that if they now reverse course, they will be completely discredited in the minds of the few Europeans who actually take these people seriously anymore. So it's like it'll be the destruction of the little credibility that remains to them, just because they're so politically invested. It's also a big part of the reason why they continue to send weapons to Ukraine, even though it's clear that Ukraine is getting crushed on the battlefield. Because if they stop sending weapons and they say Ukraine's lost, they will be utterly and completely discredited. They're going to keep this fantasy going for as long as they can. And, I think their hope is that they'll be able to pass this disaster off to some subsequent generation of political leadership in Europe after they've enjoyed all the fruits of being, members of the political elite. Their fancy summits, living in the castles like the Elysee Palace and, the champagne dinners and the private chefs and so forth. Once they've exhausted that, they're too old to enjoy those fruits of power. Then some other generation of political leadership will have to clean up the terrible mess they've left. That's the best that I can do to understand it. Otherwise, I can't make any sense of it, Jamal. I mean, what do you think? What possible reason? Who are they kidding?
I think this is about supremacy. I think for all intents and purposes, this is diversification of concerns with the U.S. Meaning, look, I agree with you. I do think there's this element of this question of what was it for? the moment that you have to acknowledge, okay, we got this wrong. The Russians won. That's kind of hard to kind of swallow. You have an organization that you've been building up for the last 50 years for the sole purpose of going after the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union goes belly up, its beating heart remains, and you organize it to be against that, just the beating heart, and you get crushed by the remnants of the Soviet Union, not even the entirety of the Soviet Union. Okay, that's humiliating on so many levels. The other part to that, though, is, from my point of view, losing in Ukraine and having to give that up is effectively admitting that you have lost control as a global power. Meaning this hegemonic control of the globe goes belly up at that point. And I think they're willing to feed every Ukrainian into a wood chipper as they prepare themselves for a potential war and a conflict against Russia. Meaning it's almost like a delaying action. Like if you had to get your platoon out of a burning building or something, and you had to send 2 guys in order to hold off for a suicide mission. I think Ukraine is a suicide mission. I think Europe, however, what they don't quite get is that the US will use them in the exact same way. That the US will feed Europe into a wood chipper of Russians, basically a Russian wood chipper, every bit as much as Europe has been willing to feed Ukraine into a wood chipper of Russians. I don't think, in the same way that I don't think we care about Europe, I don't think Europe all that much cares about Ukraine. And so they would fight to the last dead Ukrainian with hopes that within 5 years, or however long they think Ukraine can last, that they will build up their military armaments during that time period. I think this is a fantasy. I don't think this war lasts for another year. I don't even think, definitely not 2 years, but I don't believe it lasts for another year. Nor do I believe that they're going to have their military, their industries and everything up in that year to quote unquote fight the Russians in the way that they seem to be gearing up for. I mean, at least, because otherwise I don't understand what's going on.
Oh, your interpretation seems to me to be an entirely reasonable one. That could explain exactly what's going on here. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. They don't give a damn about Ukrainians. The Europeans couldn't care less about the Ukrainians, the Americans, the Canadians, and I'm sure that, as you put it, would the Trump administration shed a tear over a few 100,000 Poles having to lay down their lives in order to continue some kind of NATO-led effort to wage war on Russia? No, they wouldn't give a damn. If Russia steamrolled over the Baltic, Lilliputian Chihuahuas, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia, those Russophobes, would Washington shed a tear? Nah, look, Brussels couldn't care less. So sure, I think that your interpretation of what's going on here is very persuasive.
We want primacy. That's what we want. For all of this talk that Donald Trump makes about multipolar world, Donald Trump doesn't believe that stuff. I mean, he may say it, but Donald Trump also said he was negotiating in good faith with Iran. He said he was talking to Xi Jinping on the phone. Like Donald Trump says whatever he has to say to get from point A to point B. We want world supremacy. And if that means feeding or having the Russians and the Europeans fight in a war, we're okay with that. If that means having some kind of fight and conflict with China, we're okay with that. Like, meaning we're okay with setting countries on fire if it means that it holds them up in some particular way or fashion. And I think Europe thinks that it is the US's ally. That we don't think that way. We don't. I'm telling you, I live here. We don't think that way.
Yeah. I hope people understand what the import of what you're saying, because what it basically means is that Donald Trump is a neocon.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So I hope we can finally dispense with this stupidity, which frankly sometimes I've seen in some segments of the alternative anti-imperialist media. People I respect who bought into this notion that Donald Trump really was a peacemaker. I mean, if we can't, come to terms with the reality of who Donald Trump is now, then, we're never going to come to terms with it. The guy clearly is bent on U.S. global hegemony. He surrounded himself with people like that, people like Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth and Waltz and so forth, because they're like him.
Yes.
He didn't put them there because he was forced to. He put them there because they had the same vision, one of U.S. global hegemony. He's a dangerous, dangerous man. He's every bit as dangerous as Biden.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. Dimitri, man, I'm going to let you go. I've held you here for 45 minutes, and I appreciate your time. Absolutely. Well, one last thing. Where do you think this goes? I mean, do you think I'm right that from a Russian point of view at this point, it's unconditional surrender? Even if Mark Rutte is saying that just so Trump can't get any kind of deal, meaning to make sure that every deal is off the table because he keeps repeating it, and Russia's not going to accept anything under that guideline since they were lied to before. Unconditional surrender, is that the objective at this point?
The Russian objective, absolutely, absolutely. And I think the Russians are sophisticated enough not to call it that, right? They don't have to rub people's face in the dirt. They just want to win.
Medvedev was pretty clear.
He
was very clear.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. But Medvedev has a different rhetoric than that of the Russian president. But the president himself, and also I think this is true of the foreign minister Sergei Lavrov.
Yes.
They will try to dress this up in a way that the other side can live with it, because at the end of the day, victory is their goal, and not some kind of propaganda exercise. They want to actually win and bring the war to an end on terms that secure the Russian Federation's future. So anyways, it will be a capitulation. It will be a complete surrender. And I wouldn't be surprised if it happens this year.
Well, just to be clear, though, even when Russia wins this, there's going to be another 10-year guerrilla war. I think part of the reason, and the thing that Europe is looking at, is at the point where Russia takes all of Ukraine, that they're going to have intelligence, they're going to have terrorism, they're going to have all of that stuff in these occupied regions. I don't think for a moment that Europe is looking at it as Ukraine is lost and that's the end of it. I strongly suspect that they're just looking at a way of, let's say, bogging down the Russians into this kind of guerrilla war, especially in West Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe. That's a definite possibility, but let's look at what happened in Georgia, where they first tried this stunt in Georgia, right?
Yeah.
And the Russians crushed the Western proxy in that case, and then the country stabilized. And although there definitely is interference going on, and they're trying to engineer another color revolution in Georgia, there really hasn't been a lot of political violence I think it's been more than a decade since then. So I think it could play out that way, but it really depends at the end of the day upon the sentiments of the people on the ground. They just put out a poll in Ukraine, which showed that I think a substantial majority of the population want the war to be ended on the current contact line.
Right.
So there's a level of war fatigue there. I think they may end up, people who remain in what constitutes Ukraine after the capitulation may simply be so sick and tired of war that they just want to live in peace with the Russian people. Let's hope that that's the way it goes. But sure, the West is going to want to continue to create problems there.
From your mouth to God's ears. From your mouth to God's ears. I just don't see this regime calling it quits anytime soon. But we'll see. I hope you're right. Dimitri, thank you for this, man. I always appreciate these conversations. I love your point of view. Dimitri Lascaris, he's a lawyer, journalist, activist from Montreal, Quebec. Dimitri ran for the Green Party leadership presidential campaign of the Green Party of Canada, and he hosts Reason to Resist. Definitely check him out. By the way, when is your next show? When do you air? 12? Is it 12?
Actually doing today at 1 p.m. Eastern time, a live stream with Laith Maroof.
Laith is fantastic.
Yeah, he is.
He's fantastic.
We always have great conversation. Thanks very much, Jamal.
Thanks, man. You have a good one, okay? Be safe.
How about you too?
All right. Well, shout out to Dimitri. Always appreciate him joining me. Always appreciate those conversations. Laith is another good guest. He's a fantastic guest. They should have a really good conversation. Definitely check them out. Reason to Resist. What did he say? 1? God, it fell out of my head. I have so many different shows of people that come on. It's hard to keep track of each of the shows in a time frame. I believe it's at 1 p.m. though. And that is ET. I believe. Dimitri is in Canada. So yeah, I'm assuming it's ET. All right. We have come to the end. Definitely appreciate Dimitri. And I hope he's right. I'm very skeptical. I'm cynical of this. Because I have to come to some kind of assessment as to, okay, why is Europe continuously screaming about Ukraine and NATO? I don't even know if Ukraine is going to exist at the end of this, let alone be in NATO. And if indeed they continue to push this, then it won't exist. But I suspect in their minds, the longer this war goes on, the better off they are, the more resources they can drain out of the Russians. So from their point of view, yeah, of course, you want to keep saying it. Yeah, we're going to bring in the NATO. We're going to bring in the NATO, knowing full well that the more you say that, every syllable that comes out of your mouth is one less patch of ground that Ukraine has at its disposal. And if you keep pushing it and pushing it, there may not be a Ukraine that exists. And of course, Russia's going to be looking for some kind of security guarantees to ensure that they're not part of NATO, which I don't know how he's going to get that through Congress. So we'll see what is left of Ukraine in the first place. But again, I think that's kind of the point of them saying it. And at the end of it, in the same way they have these terrorist activities that are taking place now, where they smuggle these self-hating Russians or these other Ukrainians that smuggle themselves into Russia and carry out these terrorist attacks, that they will do exactly the same in West Ukraine if Russia takes it all. I don't even think Russia wants West Ukraine, but they may not necessarily have a choice to take it, or at the very least maybe create some kind of buffer zone where they don't have to. But I get the sense that what Europe wants is fight to the last dead Ukrainian, bog the Russian down for as long as they can, and then open up terrorist activities with whatever's the part of Ukraine that Russia takes. I don't know. We'll see. Either way you look at it, they obviously lost that war. That war is inexorably going into one particular direction, and that is westward. And Ukraine seems to be losing the capability of doing anything about it. And just to drive this point home that much more, Russia has a force in reserve of like 300,000 people with new equipment, freshly trained, that are not in the combat mission yet, but will be at some point as a dagger to the heart when they're trying to finish this particular conflict. I get the sense that they're thinking within the context of a year or maybe two, but we'll see. We'll see. Odessa, Sumy, those regions seem to be going to be firmly in the Russian camp, but we'll see how that works. If that's the case, I think Mark said they would have to take Kiev in order to make that trip down to Odessa. I don't have a map in front of me, so don't quote me on that. But I am going to call this a day. We have come to the end. We've come to the end. Let's go to chats before we close it. Let's see who. Wandy USA. Scott said the only reason we're against Palestinian genocide, we hate Israel. He told Jamal that. He had been my number one closeted Zionist. I would have to look back at the conversation one day. I would say it shocked the shit out of a lot of people. I would wager that's why Scott stopped coming on. I think he probably went into two camps. One, pushback that he received. I don't know how often anybody pushes back on Scott under normal circumstances. So usually they just let him say whatever. But what he was saying was so outlandish. It was like, why do you think that? It was like you're just forced to say, why do you think that? Why do you think that? He is going around telling any and everybody that Iran is going to get nuked. At the very least, that's what he was telling Glenn. Decent just was like, interesting. It's like, dude, why do you think the U.S. is going to have an unprovoked nuclear attack on Iran out of the blue? That just seemed weird, but nobody would bring it up. The Zionism thing was shocking. I mean, look, you guys can go look at the video for yourself. I don't want to re-quote that video because I don't remember exactly what he said, and I don't want to misquote him. But obviously that video got like 30, 40,000 people watching with like 1,000 negative comments. Look, 1,000 angry faces. So Wandy, thank you. Wandy, I appreciate it. Wandy, I am a black MAGA boomer. I abhor paid Democrats, Republicans, dual citizenship. Congress is an abomination. Agreed. The notion that somebody runs for office in this country and they have citizenship in another country is fucking outrageous. It's just outrageous. Like, it's not even, we're not even talking about somebody, let's say somebody Jewish or somebody from another country. We're not talking about somebody who is, let's say, Asian American, for example. Let's say they're Chinese American. They were born here, raised here, etc. We're not talking about that. We're talking about somebody who has a citizenship in two different countries, like somebody has a citizenship in Israel and a citizenship in the US, and they're running for office. And we're supposed to believe that they're going to care more about America as opposed to the other country to which they seem to declare loyalty. Agreed. That shit is outrageous. That shit is outrageous. Rothschild promised to shore up our stock market in 1913, 1929. We lost $54 billion. Bilderberg helps rule. Okay, Wanda, you may go a little bit further than I do with this. I agree with you on see, I can't say you're wrong with the Bilderberg thing, because effectively a bunch of rich dudes sitting in a room making plans and policy, and these people have a massive amount of control. Like one billionaire has a huge amount of control, let alone a bunch of other ones adding media figures. So fair enough, there's influence. Agree thoroughly about the dual citizenship thing. Full, complete, absolute, radical agreement about the dual citizenship thing. Piano Man, super sticker. Thank you, Piano Man. Thank you, Piano Man. I dig Elton John myself. Singing the song is for you. You can tell everybody this is your song. That's not Piano Man, that's Elton John. Sparky, Jamal, you're not trying to move it on my girl. Sabby, are you? I thought you were my friend. Now you betrayed me. Just kidding. Sabby, all around awesome. Sabby's cool people. She's very cool people. She's always been nice to me. When I hit my 50,000, Sabby put out a big banner. I hadn't said anything to her about it. Hadn't brought it up. Nothing like that. She saw it before anybody else and put this big thing on Twitter saying, Jamal is hitting 50K. She has infinitely, for the rest of time, there are very few people who, for the rest of my life, they would have loyalty is strong. Loyalty is strong. People can piss me off, or you can lose my loyalty. Appreciation, let's say that. Appreciation, and a sense of thanks, I guess. Her doing that 50K thing was a big deal to me. She didn't have to do it. It was out the blue. I didn't think anybody was even paying attention short of myself. And she put that big banner out, said, Jamal hit 50,000, Jamal hit 50,000. Give him credit for it. So shout out to her for that. She's always been nice to me. She's always been cool people. And I've really enjoyed, she has a damn good show. Her ability to run a show and to, see, I cheat. I do interviews. I cheat. And what I mean by that is, I may have a monologue when I have something specific to say. Like if I have something very specific that I want to communicate, I would do a monologue. Doing a radio show and doing a monologue every day, I tell you, I don't have something to say every day. And so it's kind of like there are things that are big that happen, I care about and focus my attention on. It's like that. I need to talk about that. But I got to be honest, those things are specific to me. And so I may not care about every issue that take place. There may be very specific things that I care about that are on my mind at any particular moment. At some point, Russia. At some point, Iran. At some point, well, I tend to be interested in wars in general. Domestic, less so, even though there may be something that bubbles up in a domestic sense. It just kind of depends on what it is. She has a damn good show where she does interviews, but she also carries the show herself for, I think she does a 2-3 hour show. She may do 1 or 2 interviews, but for the most part, she carries it, and she's fantastic at it. So yeah, she is a great, she has a great guest, and she has a fantastic show. And I remember I was sitting there watching her show one day thinking like, wow, she's so good at this. She is. She is. And again, I don't get compliments if I don't need to. She is on that list. Garland Nixon is on that list. He would have my appreciation for the end of time. End of time. But Sparky, my cousin lived in New York City after Second World War. We were similar problems with cultural displacement due to rents shooting up, which were obviously a problem even back then, while rent control helped some. Honestly, man, $5,000 for rent, I can't wrap my head around it. I just can't. Like my rent in DC was $1,900, and that was because I lived in somewhat of a bad neighborhood. It wasn't horrible, but it was great in comparison to some of the other locations. But if you were in DC proper, you might get a 1 studio for $2,000, maybe if you're lucky. And I'm comparing that to Richmond, where in Richmond you could get a damn good apartment for $1,300, $1,200. And so you can imagine me going to DC and I'm like, whoa, what the fuck? I'm not paying that until you find out that that's the cheapest you're gonna pay. No, I don't know. I don't know how people do it. I just don't. I don't know how people live with that stuff. In DC, I was making a pretty decent salary. And so you can afford your living situation. But if you're not making a certain price point, I don't know how you do it. Adding a kid, oh God, it's even worse, right? 2 incomes help. When I was married, it helped because at that point we had 2 incomes. But when you are stuck with 1 income, it becomes harder. Sparky, when I was a kid, inner city Atlanta, we had a few white people around, but they were cool, creative, fun white people. Gentrification brought in dull, Karen white people with their rules. See, that one is complicated for me because it depends on what you mean. I'm trying to figure out how to cut this, how to say it. So if you are, look, I don't want anybody to be in a poor neighborhood. I want everybody to have means. And I don't think, either being a socialist, being a communist means that everybody's poor, if that makes sense. Meaning, I want people to have a decent school. I want people to make enough to make ends meet. I don't want people kicked out of their homes. And I don't want those communities gentrified. I guess what I'm saying is, I want people to be able to afford those homes without necessarily being in disrepute. I hope that makes sense. I want everybody to kind of float up. Now, that's like me saying, I want a unicorn and I want a pony. How do you make that in real world, physical matter reality? I don't have an answer for it. I just don't have an answer for it. Cities, by definition, are going to want to increase their tax base. And so a city, just built on the mechanics of it, is going to want more money into its coffers, which means higher incomes, which means if it can get rid of certain people, it will. That's fucked up, but it's true. And so it's like, okay, so that means that you need to somehow increase the incomes of the people who are living in the area, meaning you need better jobs. You need, I don't know. I don't know how that works. Like, I just don't know how our system goes in a particular direction if it gets the opportunity to do so. And I think that's what people are encountering. And in New York, it's just so absurd because who the fuck can afford a $5,000 apartment? I don't know. Sparky agreed these things are issues. I have no idea how to fix those issues. I would tell you in DC, they have zoning laws. And in zoning laws, it means you can't put certain buildings in certain locations. And so even if they wanted to increase the housing, couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. Malik, one of the good things about Malik was that Malik worked for the city at one point. And he worked in the city in a capacity where he had to deal with those rules, those laws, and those type of things. And so when stuff like this came up, Malik will point out, hey, where are you going to put those people? It's like, well, you need to build homes. Where are you going to build those homes? And he would point out there are all sorts of zoning laws and zoning provisions that prevent those things from even coming to fruition. So even if you got a platform saying we're going to build more houses, how are you going to do it? It's fucked up. It's really fucked up. Yeah, I am not the person to talk about this. That's why I sat there and just listened to Sabrina because I couldn't respond sensibly to it. If we are talking about foreign policy, then I'm your man. If you're talking about housing provisions, I know dick about it. I know dick about it. Just fence off your street. Thanks. I don't think anybody wants to have to fence off their street. The European rearmament is highly dangerous. Both Germany and England cannot be trusted with power and weapons. Laurie, no. Especially not Germany, but neither. I mean, at this point, both of these are weak countries that are sucking off the tit of Donald Trump and wants Donald Trump to backstop them in regards to a larger war because they think that the Russians, or that they can effectively boss the Russians around if the US gets involved. I think they're mistaken. And I think what they would end up in is a war, a nuclear war. Germany and London are stupid enough to do that because they are so hubristic that they've gotten to that position, which on some level means that you shouldn't let people get into that position meaning a bit of aggressiveness is not a negative thing. And at the point where people think, oh, well, they're going to back down or they're going to do so and so, on some level, you've taught them that you're willing to do it. Now, that might have been true before. Russia has like a 1 million-man military that can eat Europe alive if it needed to. I don't think that's true today. I don't think that's true today. And the type of war that you'll be fighting in Europe, I don't think that's true today. It's one thing to project power around the globe. Fair enough. That's not the way their military is designed. That's not what they want. Most countries are not insane. But if you're fighting them on their home turf, they can touch you, and they can touch you in a way that you can't compensate. Germany is not even far away. Berlin is very close. The Russians have been to Berlin once before, ransacked it. Keep fucking around, you find out. I'm going to end this now. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe. I want to thank all of you for joining me. We had a damn good show today. Tomorrow, Professor Morandi is going to be here tomorrow. That should be interesting. I'm so interested in hearing what he has to say on this. Because it's one thing to talk to Brian, or it's one thing to talk to Mark. It's another thing to be like, hey, now what? Now what? You beat the monster back. The monster is licking its wounds. And it is licking its wounds. Don't let them convince you otherwise. But now what? Now, I don't believe for a moment that Morandi would say, yeah, they're going to rush to the bomb. I don't believe it. If it was true, he would never tell me. But I am super curious. I mean, Syria beat back the monster too, if you remember. Didn't stop the monster from coming. And if you get into these continuous conflicts where you exchange and stop, exchange and stop, exchange and stop, and you stop every time the US gets involved, then what? Aren't you just being pecked to death? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I still say that the reason that Iran stopped had more to do with the fact that the US got involved and they understood that strike, that theatrical strike was theatrical in one sense, but it was serious in another. And in that other sense where it was serious, it was our colony, our client needs to stop. And so we need you to stop, or else we're going to get further involved. But I get the sense that Trump wants this shit to be over with. It's not that he wasn't for overthrowing the Iranian government. He was. But he doesn't want to get embroiled into a larger Middle Eastern war, at least not where 50,000 bodies come back home to the US in body bags. Nor does Iran want to get into a larger war with the US, which is why they've been showing restraint. It's a deterrence. But just because you have a deterrence over large-scale war doesn't necessarily mean that skirmishes aren't, let's say, allowed, especially using your client as your proxy of doing so. So I don't know. I suspect there's going to be some kind of hybrid warfare that's taking place where they're going to try to use internal and external attacks where Iran is going to have to fend off. And then the question ultimately is going to come up is how many attacks are you going to tolerate from the US? That's going to be your question. And that question is monstrous. Oh, that question is monstrous. We'll see. I'm curious on what Morandi has to say, though. All right, I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. You guys have a fantastic day. And I will see you all bright and early tomorrow morning. Be safe, everyone. And be kind, or at the very least try to be.